Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Click R3, episode 5. 5 episodes in. Feels good. Feels good. Feels like we got a podcast here. Let me go over here to co-host. We have Ryan, of course, joining me as usual. How we doing, Ryan?
Doing all right, John. We're here 5 episodes in. I think it's gonna stick. I don't know.
I think so.
I don't know.
Yeah. Figured out, I think now. It's like ingrained at this point. 5 episodes in. Yeah, I think we're there. Because I said after we get like 5 episodes under our belt, maybe I'll look around, see if I can find a guest or two here and there when we have a chance, just to kind of make things up a bit. But I think we got it. I think this is it right here.
I think we're settling in nicely. It's like a big queen size mattress. I'm in that bitch. You're starting to come in as well. It's a little, it's a little comfy. Like maybe after episode 10 we'll cuddle up a little bit.
Well, it was funny. Last episode we had recorded, and then some information came out from like Sony and Bungie and stuff, and that figures. I can't believe it. Of course, this time though, another story broke an hour before we recorded. So like we're actually here for like somewhat breaking news at this point. So I'm excited. That's one of the topics tonight too. Big topic that might be bringing Hi-Fi Rush a bit closer to Sony for all we know. So some interesting stuff there. But Ryan's got all kinds of cool stuff to go over. Of course, we're going to do the PSX Go and Give It to You. I think it's going to be a lot of fun this episode.
Got a lot of stories. A lot of stories to go over. You want to just jump right into that, bitch? Or
yeah, I played another 20 minutes of Doki Doki Literature Club today, Ryan. I will keep you posted.
Oh, 20 more minutes. Well,
I'm doing it in like 15 or 20 minute increments here. Because you can save whenever. You just drop down a little menu thing at the bottom, save, and I'm good. So I'm just kind of going between them.
I like how that's as much time you're willing to give that, like per session, like a solid 20 minutes.
Hey, they made a mistake when they told me it was like 4 or 5 hours long. I'm like, all right, cool. I'll be done this in like a week or two.
I'd say if you do it like an hour, you're like 20% done. So,
but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Well, it depends on how fast you read too. So, and I imagine you're only going to do like one go through, and you're not going to, God forbid, jump through it a second time to get different results.
Well, it depends. You never know. Maybe I get to the end and I'm like, oh, wow, okay, what would have happened here? And maybe I will, because then I'm skipping, like the whole beginning is just rambling about nothing. So honestly, if I didn't care what I'm reading, I could skip through like a good chunk of that first part of it without any issue at all.
Well, you can't skip that though. That's lore building, it's character development. You're supposed to care about those girls.
Well, and then, they talk a lot.
John over here, big fan of visual novels, apparently.
No problem mashing that cross button until I get to some kind of twist.
Sicko. You got to sit there and soak in the story, soak in the waifus. All right. Let's get into some news here. PlayStation Plus Essential August lineup that's live on PSN now. I don't think we talked about this before, right? It wasn't revealed by the time we did last episode. That's Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, and then Ender Lily's Quietus of the Nights. I didn't even hear about that one when this lineup was announced, but apparently that's kind of the standout, to be honest, because
have you played the Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga? That actually is a very good Lego. That's probably the best Lego game I think has ever come out. Like that is like way above what their normal ambition would be. There's a lot to that game, but it's already to the point where they've marked it down so much. I think at one point it was like $17 or something. So that it's been marked down over and over. This seemed like kind of a hey. Everyone who's bought it everyone who was going to buy it has bought it. Why don't we throw it in the subscription service, get another check from Sony, and call it a day? So I think that's kind of what this was. But if you haven't played it, honestly, it's a fun co-op game. If you're into Star Wars, I think it works well.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I'm not into Star Wars.
Okay, there you go. Never mind. you just keep walking past it.
I know. Well, for me personally, like I'm not big on Star Wars. I mean, I like the Lego games, but it just seems like Essential's kind of been taking a nosedive lately with all these games that are like clearly just, on the age-wise, they're like pretty old. So it's like they're already deeply discounted. And like what Security Breach came out, and that was actually somewhat recent, wasn't it? Was that 2020? Was that last year? Or 2022?
I really want to pretend right now that I know anything about Five Nights at Freddy's. I do not.
I feel like it was like 2 years ago or something. And the Ender Lily's one, I was like, oh, this seems cool. It's like an action adventure Metroidvania.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm like, that looks like an interesting, fun little game to kind of throw in there for some exposure.
That's the thing. I don't know. At least for me nowadays, I feel like I value those more in PS Plus than
Hmm.
anything else. Where it's like,
Sure.
wow, didn't even hear about that. Seems cool
Yeah.
enough.
Become aware of it
Chances,
that way. So yeah.
yeah, chances are people don't know about it. Uh, but a really annoying thing, right? So we've got
Mhm.
5 more games that are going to be leaving PS Plus, the game catalog. I think these are all extra games. None of them are under premium, but they're all leaving in about, well, at this point, it would be a week and a half. And the problem is that typically when the extra lineup gets announced, the extra and premium lineup, that's when the last chance to play section gets updated. So you've got about a 30-day window to play those remaining games that are going
Mhm.
to exit the service. So when that refreshed, it was 5 titles. Now they added 5 more. And it's like, well, could you have not done that like at the time when people would have had extra, that sort of extra safety net to play these games? I mean, you've got like they added Destroy All Humans on there, which makes sense because Humans 2 Reprobed is on there. But then
Mhm.
there's Midnight Fight Express, Moving Out 2, but also Sea of Stars and Lost Judgment.
Oh, that one actually kind of hurts.
That burns because those are both like 30, 40, like what, 50-hour games, right? So it's you're just telling people about that like with just enough time for somebody if they have enough time to like completely play it. So I don't know what they got going on back there, but it's like, guys, make sure that list is like updated 30 days out at the very minimum.
That was a day one release too. That Sea of Stars. Oh
Yeah.
man,
Mhm.
that's kind of rough. I mean, that is a game that I would tell most people if you like fire it up, see what you think about it. If you like it, I tell people that's one to buy physically. It still has that feeling of like the old days on it with RPGs. That's like you want to have this up on the shelf.
Yes, yes. I do need to get that physical too. That's exactly the vibe that you're describing. It's like kind of one of those games where I feel like I should get it physically.
It has this vibe of like the old PS1, PS2 days somewhere in there. So
Hmm. It was well received too. But it's just
mhm,
like for
thank you.
when the hour minimum is like 30 plus, like it's just not great when you're finding out about this with very
Well,
little
no.
time. Yeah, very
Good
little time left.
PlayStation Portal game though. If like during see for me,
Ooh.
I've been picking out PlayStation Portal games that I'm gonna play during football season when I'm watching on TV, and I can sit there with the Portal and play. And that was one that actually had would have crossed my mind, but I actually just played it I just played it on the TV. But like I'm thinking of like Balatro was one that I was going to kick around probably during the football season somewhat and some others. So that's kind of how I try to figure this out. What's a good PlayStation Portal game for certain like times, and I think that's one that I would recommend. Sea of Stars.
Yeah, that's exactly. I think a lot of people are approaching the Portal that way. It's like what's like kind of a low commitment game that's not super
Mhm.
kinetic and it's going to mess up if, God forbid, the connection's poor. Let's move on to Astro's Playroom, another VIP bot out there. So, John, come on, tell me, did the kids
I
jump
didn't do
in?
it. I didn't do it yet. I didn't do it yet. What's
No.
the no? What's the bot? What's the bot we got here?
Oh, you didn't even see what it was, huh? It's a
Hmm.
Gran Turismo bot. So it's
Mine did update.
got
I
a little
saw the
helmet.
update happen a couple days ago, and I will fire that up and get it. I usually what I do now is because the kids really like Astro. Usually, I when I get a chance, we try to find it. So
Hmm.
I'll sit them down. We'll try to find this bot. We'll make
Okay,
it happen.
well, this one's the most involved one so far to
Really? That
rescue. Yeah.
they said the other ones were found a little too fast, a little too easily, so they were gonna try to make this one a little more difficult. Okay, cool.
I mean, it's like when you get the instructions, you're like, oh, that's simple. But like, I guess if you were trying to figure this out, it'd probably take quite a bit. So it's the most involved one. You have to like find starfish on the beach, then find a
Oh,
steering
it's
wheel.
each level.
Yeah,
Oh, cool. All right,
cooling
good.
springs. Yeah. So
Okay.
I don't know if I want to spoil the ritual for you, but it's like
That's a fan favorite around here at the beach.
the cooling springs.
Yes. Well, hold on, not necessarily the one where you have to like spring yourself around. They just like running around the beach and then the
Yeah, the
pool
first
inside. So
area.
that's all they want to do. So yeah, if it's right in there, perfect. We're good.
That is right in there. Yep. So another VIP bot. One left. One left. And I think we know what that bot is going to be because that silhouette was pretty damn obvious. All right.
You're
Moving
signing
on.
for that bot.
Well,
Maybe even.
once
Yeah.
that bot drops, I'll rescue all 4 of them.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Just
Yeah.
ahead of the release. Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, we got something that the PlayStation Store probably should have had 15 goddamn years ago, but better late than never. This is usually on Sony's timeline here. PlayStation Store written reviews. It appears as though Sony is now testing out this functionality. So they were sending out emails to people, inviting them to write a written review for games that they recently bought on PSN. So What we can suss out here is that it has to be digital purchases. It's usually a lot of high-profile games that people are reporting, so things like Hogwarts Legacy, Helldivers 2, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's not something where you can see this on PSN right now. You can't just go choose to do it, but if Sony invites you to write a written like review, then you can go ahead and do that. And obviously, it's based on what it seems like. If you put a number of hours into the game, if you've got a decent amount of time in on it, and it's a valid purchase, then that's what they're doing here. So seems like, this probably should have been a thing a long time ago, right?
I have to imagine the reason it hasn't been is just because curation is probably one of the most annoying things to deal with in that case. Like half the time, if I just look at Twitter X or Twitter X, and then imagine half the stuff you see on there, people trying to work into reviews and complain on the store.
I mean, a part of me thinks like, oh, they're doing it now because there's just like, and I don't know if this would be like a portion of the business where they're exploring like AI curation. So it's much easier. It's like much easier to like sift through it versus like the resources that were available even 10 years ago. Cause it's not like written reviews weren't a thing. Like the Xbox stores had it for a long time. Obviously Steam's had it as well. So it's like,
and I mean, but sometimes we see on Steam how that can kind of backfire on these companies, like where they put their stuff out. And I'm sure there are some who don't want those. They don't want reviews. They don't want any of that stuff. So look, just let us put the game out. We don't want to get review bombed over this update or this thing that we do, which sometimes it's good that people can speak out there, right? Other times you have people who will come in and they'll do that. There's a reason people don't take the user reviews on Metacritic seriously, because someone will come in and give like Elden Ring a 0 or something, and it's, or they'll give Horizon Forbidden West a 0 because it's not on Xbox, or something like that. It's like, what is going on here? It's just a waste of a review, a waste of a space. But if you can get genuinely useful information out of it, then yes, in a perfect world, written reviews make a ton of sense. But then you realize anyone can make these reviews, and you're like, what kind of stuff they're going to type in there? So I'm sure that's why Sony has been hesitant somewhat, or at least they've been thinking it through a bit more to make sure it doesn't get out of control in there. But I mean, it's just more information for the person buying the game, so it should be good. But we'll see what happens when the internet gets hold of it.
Well, it's the thing, right? I mean, you would imagine they want to go about this in the way that sort of circumvents all those problems. Like Metacritic is like completely useless. Didn't they just have that policy change recently where it's like after a game comes out, they don't let you submit a user review for like at least a day or something, like 24 hours, just so like the second it's 12 o'clock, like they don't let you, because clearly nobody can play the game that fast. But also like you can just submit a review and there's no knowing that they actually own the game. So it's like from a storefront, at least there's some leverage there. It's like, okay,
it's in the library.
You have to own the game. And I would like them to approach this like Steam, which is display how many hours they've played of that game.
That's a good idea.
It's an easy way to, throw out opinions when you can see some guy's bitching and he's only played it for 20 minutes, so seems like they're probably just testing this out. They do like to, at least during the PlayStation 5 cycle, they've been very, not slow, but it seems like every sort of new feature they do this very gradual rollout. So I'm not sure what the timeline is on if this would like go live for everyone soon, but
something you're going to just randomly get in a beta update one day.
I feel like it'll be just server side. It'll just show up on PSN someday.
But I mean, like, wouldn't you think they would show written reviews on the home screen you keep referencing? Like, would they eventually bring that up, and then when you log or turn on your PS5, a game comes up and then written reviews next to it,
like on the Explore icon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it wouldn't be an Explorer, but like the entire store is server side, and that's all that's cache. So I mean, any changes there, I imagine it would just show up. Like just someday you're going to browse the store, and then all of a sudden written reviews are on there. So that's what I assume is going to happen. Just don't know when they're going to get to it. Now, the story that we obviously missed, well, I guess we'll try and like digest this one now, huh? We'll sort of quickly go through some bullet points so we're not spending too much time on an old story. But the Bungie layoffs, right? So the sort of quick recap here: Bungie announced layoffs. This was Pete Parsons announced it on the blog. Excuse me. So 220 staff were laid off. 155 additional roles are moving over to SIE over the next few quarters. 40 of them are being spun off into a new PlayStation studio. That's Project Gummy Bears. That was an incubation project at Bungie for quite a bit. I guess it was paused like a year and a half ago or something. Jesus Christ. So that's going to be a new PS studio. And those are all stacked, right? So that's 220, then another 155, then another 40. Bungie was at like 1,300 staff. Then now they're going to be sized down to like 800. Codename Payback was also canceled before the layoffs, so that's not Destiny 3 apparently. I guess that was a little mixed up there. And apparently this was going to happen. That's what we're hearing too, is like no matter how well the Final Shape expansion was going to do for Destiny 2, like this was always like people were expecting no matter what these layoffs were going to end up happening. And like the sort of aftermath immediately that we saw from this is that a lot of former employees from the studio were calling out the CEO, Pete Parsons, and it's a lot of accusations, a lot of, overspending, lying about financials. Like the guy was, I guess, also just very insensitive in a manner where it's like he's buying exotic cars or something on on auctions and then fires people 2 days after. Just great crazy optics. Stuff, right? Yeah, very good optics. Honestly, it's kind of nutty how like, because you know where this goes immediately, right? It's like, oh, they were acquired by Sony, so what's going on there? And it's fascinating to see how many people are like, no, like this was all Parsons, which is kind of strange because I guess it sheds more light on, I guess, the financial side of Bungie, where they were just really sort of underwater in a way, where it's like if they did not sell, they might have been in an even worse position.
Oh, I think they would have been gone. Like I think they would have just been insulted. There was a story about that, but for a while there had been discussions kind of like kicked around behind the scenes a bit that Bungie had approached Microsoft, sort of like they were trying to work out a way where Microsoft would buy them, and the number was too high. And then we had the documents that got leaked out from the FTC trial where Microsoft had evaluated Bungie. It was Bungie and Sega. It was kind of in like a similar document, and they recognized that Bungie's their burn rate was too high. As in, they can bring in a bunch of money, sure, with Destiny 2 and the recurring revenue, but they use so much capital to keep this thing upright that it doesn't really make sense in the long run for us to own them. So why would we do that when we already have Destiny 2 on our system? And I think that's just the way they approached it. Whereas Microsoft has multiplayer games. Like that is the one thing I'll give them. They do multiplayer games fairly well, at least, and they at least have experience with it. I feel like right now Sony was trying to figure out this live service thing because clearly they seem to think 12 of them were coming out at one point, and I think we talk about it was north of $3 billion with incentives. It was like three and a half, basically, right, somewhere around there for Bungie.
3.6.
Right. And I think a lot of that purchase, it's crazy to say, but was kind of intangible in nature for the value, in the sense that they'll help us with these live service games. They'll help us with evaluation. That is worth a lot for the potential future of one that breaks out like Helldivers 2. But if we could have a few of those, this 3.6 billion will feel like nothing. And then they'll also keep rolling with Destiny 2. And man, that burn rate, I guess, caught up with them. I will say the thing that shocks me out of all of this, Ryan, when I saw this news come out and the information was flowing all over the place with this, I was shocked that there was never plans in place for a Destiny 3.
Is that really the big thing that came out of it? Because I guess everyone did think that Payback was Destiny 3, right? Like that was
kind of the word was like, oh, this is Destiny 3. That's okay. They are working on it. Great. At least there's an idea. There's a concept. There's a path forward. And no, they just never thought, hey, we've made Destiny 2. There's a 2 on the end. Maybe people would expect a 3, and maybe that would give us a way to onboard new players a bit easier than if you jump into Destiny 2 and there's like 7 or 8 years of content for that, and then the Destiny content before that. And if you try to get in now, like, so I did load it up in anticipation of us talking about it here, and I was like, let me just see. Let me see what we have. Like, I have it on the Xbox, the PlayStation. You can just download it on PC. It's like free to play outside of the expansions. But I think like PlayStation Plus, they had given it to us in the subscription service, and I had added it to my library. And then on the Xbox, same deal. I think part of it's in Game Pass or something. So I have all these avenues to get to it. Load it up, start a new character, pick Warlock, go through. The opening is a little different than I remember it to be, but they do get you to like the Capitol building very quickly. And as soon as you get past that initial mission, it's just so much stuff thrown at you. And it's all these quest lines and there's markers everywhere. And it's just like, I don't know. It is that sense of I'm not really sure what you want me to do here, but there's stuff everywhere, and I don't really want to play now.
that is a great point, and it's it's something I think about a lot with a lot of live service titles because clearly I'm not really into that kind of genre of game or how those sorts of titles are approached. But I always do think at the back of my mind, like, what is the onboarding process like for a game that's like 3, 4, 5 years in, and how captivating is that to like somebody that just wants to get in, and how do they easily onboard players in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming considering they are jumping in like very late, after all those multiple expansions, and people are probably mindful of that. Like, oh, Destiny 2 has been around for so and so many years now, and I've heard about all these expansions, the Witch Queen and Final Shape and First Light. Is that the other one, right? So it's like you hear about them all the time, but to then jump in, even knowing it's free to play, I'm always curious what it's like once you do jump back in again.
Yeah, so I ended up just doing Crucible, which there is a Crucible mode, which is basically the PvP, right? So they have a mode where it basically evens out all your power levels. Your weapons can still play a role, but I did that, and we actually won the match. So I was like, all right, cool, I'm done. So great. I thought about going back in there with some people and maybe trying one of these expansions that I just have in my library for whatever reason. Maybe I'll see. I get like a group of 3 or 4 together, try running it and see what happens. But the problem is it feels like you're just never going to catch up. And that's why I feel like if you had Destiny 3, at least in the works, and you could have that launch in the next few years, that would have been, I think, the way to go. Now it feels like, how do you get Destiny 3 out if you've cut the studio staff down significantly, right? Well, I mean, what was it? You said over 1,300. Now they're down to about 800 to 850, somewhere in there.
850 or something like that.
Their focus is on Destiny 2. Like it needs to figure out how to onboard people at this point.
So yeah, I guess that it'll segue nicely into like the other portion of this, which we can just dive into now, which is the Q&A portion during Sony's recent financial report, right? So, we'll talk about like console sold and everything in a second here, but like the QA portion with the investors. So like the opening question for the Sony president, COO, CFO Hiroki Totoki was, the current state of Bungie, the restructuring. And so what he confirmed at the time was that Bungie's, and this is his words, how he described it, as back end office operations and functions. Those are getting integrated into SIE because they have to enhance the efficiency of the business. And they also said that their existing resources are going into just Destiny 2 and Marathon. So 850 staff, really doubling down on enhancing the efficiencies of just those 2 games, funneling all resources into just those 2 properties. Now, I don't know if that means for certain that, because this was like a looming thing with the last round of layoffs, with that recent IGN report about how it's, Sony's on the board. That was part of the acquisition process. So Eric Lempel and Herman Hulster on the board. There's a contingency plan where if they don't meet certain financial goals, then Sony's going to take over the board and take over the company. So we still don't necessarily know if that played out just now, but it seems incredibly apparent that like, if it hasn't happened, like the process is beginning. And what I think, it's funny, John, what I think is happening here is that they had so much shit going on, right? Like Payback and then Gummy Bears. And then was there like another one too?
They had a bunch of incubation projects apparently. So there's probably like, at least a couple we haven't heard about.
Yeah. It's like, okay, like 1,300 people sounds like a lot. Sure. But it sounds like, in a way, like Sony paid 3.6 billion to like learn a very harsh lesson about live service with a studio that's like incredibly mismanaged on live. And I say mismanaged in a way where it's like, clearly they're just trying to, I think, scale up way too aggressively. And they were just maybe flying a bit too close to the sun. There's still like value to like, it's Bungie, it's Destiny, right? Like these are still strong properties and they have high player counts. Like they do know to a degree, how to make these kinds of games, but it just
Well,
it seems
let
like
me ask you this, Ryan. Would you rather, because that was $3.5 billion, and
yeah.
people start thinking about how much games cost, and they go, wow, they really spent like 17 Last of Us Part 2s on this thing. Then you start thinking about like that though, right? Like, man,
Yeah.
because we see them go look at some of these budgets for games approaching like $300 million for some of them. They go, wow, we got to start making cuts. It's like, well, yeah, but I mean, you could, that's a lot of money that could have gone into just make, you're not going to spend all of it at once. Obviously you're not going to make 17 big AAA Last of Us Part 2s all at once, but it's like that context. You're like, wow, okay. Bungie needs to turn out something now other than Destiny 2's current position, which, man, it puts a lot of pressure on Marathon if that's the other thing they're focusing on right now.
Yeah, I feel like that's well, like that's what they like learned, right? Like that's the 3.6 billion went to like fully understanding now, like so this is what it looks like this is what live service looks like to even so much as humor the idea of like maintaining a successful one, trying to catapult a new one, and then we've got 3 or 4 in the early incubation stage. It's like, whoa, guys, there's no goddamn way that this is going to work. So let's chop up all this. As a other separate news story here, like we're hearing that gummy bears, I guess, was like the most promising one. So that might add context into why they're like, okay, well, we can see there's some value with this one. Maybe it was the one that's the furthest along. Maybe it's got a vertical slice that's the most proven out of
You know
everything
what
in
it is
there.
that's so interesting, I think about it, Ryan, to people because I heard a bunch of people talk about it in
Hmm.
like that week or so that all was going on as people got more information. No one seemed to be able to describe exactly what genre it would fall into. And
Yeah,
like they were trying to put it together like, all right, I think it's like a MOBA fighting action game. I'm not really sure that once you start hearing that they can't be like, oh, it's a hero shooter, oh, it's a looter shooter. Then it's
yeah,
okay. I understand why that one might be a bit more promising because it's something that may not exist fully on the market right now. That makes sense to have that live service game, at least take a shot at it, attempt it because it's unique. So
right. Yeah, the way people piece that together is they looked at like the 2023 tweet that Bungie put out, and the way they described it was it draws inspiration from fighting games, platformers, MOBAs, life sims, and frog-type games wrapped up in a lighthearted comedic world. What the actual
yeah, I have no idea what that is. But you know what? I will give this.
platformers,
I'm at least a little interested in that just to see.
MOBAs, life sims, and frog-type games? Well, I tell you what I've been really missing out of live service is frog-type games. So,
Hey,
yeah.
coming
I
up.
so point being like that. Okay, so that one it seems like now that SI has them in, it's like okay, we'll make that a separate studio. Which that comes with a whole different can of worms because now it's like okay, well, is that gonna be a proper PlayStation studio? Does that mean that game's exclusive? Obviously, game's probably 4 or 5, 7 years away. Who knows? But it just
Right.
seems like now that they have them, right? The 3.6 bill gone. Yikes, that was a lesson. Now we know how much it costs, how many people it takes. Like now that we're integrating all the back end stuff, like we're gonna make sure that like if we're gonna be staffing 800 goddamn people, we better be able to sustain these 2 games comfortably. And perhaps that also gave the company a lot more insight into their other projects because this does line up with their layoffs, if you remember from December, because the Bungie layoffs happened and that was late July or what
Mhm.
was it? Late September, somewhere around. It was like, the layoffs happened in December, and that was also when we found out that Last of Us Part Two or Last of Us Online canceled, Twisted Metal canceled, which was also going to be a live service game, and then London Studio shut down. They were making a live service game, so it's like that was well after the Bungie acquisition closed. So it's like
Mhm.
now that they have a full understanding of the financials that went into like one of the most well-known live service studios, I think it's a very expensive lesson they just learned.
Yeah, it's not. If they go back in time, they would not make this purchase. I think everyone kind of agrees on that. They'd say, "Nah, we're good then. 3.5 billion, no." But you're right. It is at this point a lesson and out. But the thing that it's so obvious that Sony did not want to have to move into this role with Bungie because they waited as long as they did. It was, I think for most of us, it was obvious when they first started talking about how everything was riding on final shape back when when they made the initial layoffs. You mentioned what last year, once that happened, I think all of us were like, okay, hold on. I think there are videos of many people going, oh, okay, Sony's they're going to take this studio over. There's no way.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that we all kind of saw that Sony had to have known, and they waited this long, seemingly, we don't have it fully confirmed that Herman Holst is running Bungie, although it looks kind of obvious from the outside. I don't think they wanted any part of this, because now they buy Bungie with the idea of them basically helping to run live service. Now they take over Bungie, having to run the studio that they had hired to help them run their live service. So it's like, great. Yeah. All right, let's bring some of them internally. Let's see if we can make Gummy Bears works. And everyone cross your fingers and hope for Marathon. My God, because it is that so much pressure on Marathon right now. And did you see, I think Jason Schreier was on Friends Per Second podcast.
Yeah, talking about the shape that Marathon's in right now.
It didn't sound great, unfortunately. It didn't. The sentiment wasn't great around it, apparently, and reportedly, I'll say. And he brought up Suicide Squad in the same sentence, and I was like, oh man, it feels like Marathon is already kind of behind the 8 ball, and we haven't even seen gameplay for the thing yet. Like, it seems like the sentiment is low around this thing.
Do you wonder if it's just the sentiment is low because there's already a sort of live service fatigue?
Or is it just, I think live service games are like, anytime you say new games coming, live service, as soon as people read that, they go, all right, I guess let's see what it is. Like, you're already on your back foot as soon as you say the words. Somebody out there, it's all these marketing firms get paid so much money. Someone come up with a new term. My gosh, just anything other than live service, because they all want to use that word. I guess because it speaks to investors, but it also speaks to the consumers very negatively now. Like, there's just this fatigue that surrounds it.
It's got a lot of baggage surrounding it. And you know what's interesting is that I was thinking the other day about Helldivers 2 and Concord, which is like yeah, they're live service, but they're monetized in a way where it's like very similar to boxed multiplayer. Like, it is $40 up front. Like, it's not like an arena style, like, PS3 multiplayer game, but like, in a way, like, nothing's stopping you from like paying $40 and having your time with it and then setting it down. Cause that's kind of what a lot of, at least like more in the enthusiast space, like that's where a lot of the retort comes from, is like, I'm sick of these free to play live service games, but we do have these 2 that came out that are monetized in a very old style fashion, if that makes sense.
I think the issue with it is the studio comes out with the game and then they're stuck to that game.
Yeah.
It feels like forever.
Pressure.
They're never stepping away from that game. This is it. Whereas back in the day, you get your single player game that had multiplayer tacked on, and then the studio would just leave and they would just go work on the next thing. That's it. Whatever this is, here you go. And communities would just keep that game alive just because they liked the way the game played. And you had single player, so you're already kind of buying in at the time maybe for that. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. This Splinter Cell Chaos Theory also has this cool multiplayer to it that was like spies versus mercenaries, and we played that for a long time. Rainbow Six, Vegas. I remember playing Vegas 2 constantly back in the day, and the multiplayer was cool, but it wasn't like, oh, every week we're going to have a new video that's going to talk more about the backstory of this character, and we're going to add in these skins, and we're going to do all these extra little bits and pieces that you unlock as you go. It's like, look, whatever. It's just a fun game. Sure, you get ranks and stuff. That was enough. Back then with like Halo 3, all it was about was a little ranking and emblem next to your name. That's all we played for. Like, because eventually you'd unlock, they had like armor already built in that you'd unlock as you go through. You get like the Hayabusa armor and stuff. That was cool. You were done that in like a week of playing. The rest of it was just all held up by trying to get to level 50. And your rank would go down if you did poorly, it'd go up if you did well. And that's all that kept us going. That, and of course, just playing with your friends and just being a fun game. So that's kind of the industry I want to see make a resurgence again. I want those games become popularized. Games that, the studio, they make it. It's a single player, multiplayer combo. Throw it out there, and we'll see it with the sequel.
It's tough. It's tough to do that. It is so weird how, like, remember like the sort of peak multiplayer was like, oh, there's a map pack for $10.
Yeah, that was
that was the new content. Like, that was a big deal. like a huge deal. Like, yo, the map
Sometimes they'd
pack.
release them at retail. Like I remember the Halo 2 had a map pack you could buy, and now you put it in the Xbox, and it would install it to your hard drive. That's the whole thing.
You know what I think about a lot though is that there must be a lot of market research on this, and why those games just aren't viable anymore. I mean, it's got to be this, very short attention span for consumers nowadays. If you're not pumping in new content to to these games, it's because this is something Sony talks about occasionally, which is like a direct competitor for them is Microsoft, sure, but like they'll always say that they're competing with like entertainment. Everything is like anything that keeps people away from their PlayStation is to them competition. They think Netflix is a competitor. They think HBO is a competitor, even though they've got their own show. But you know what I mean. They think entertainment outside, recreation. If anything, if it keeps them away from their PlayStation 5, to them that's competition. So that's why they so closely track things like average time on the console, like how many gameplay hours are on PS5 versus PS4, which is tremendously higher on this console versus PlayStation 4, largely because of like the near down the middle split of like standard boxed games and then like 10 live service titles.
Yeah, you know what gets me about it though is you see these games that get to the finish line and they get canceled, not because the game's not done, but because there's concern about the cost of what you do post release. So Hyenas from Sega was one. They canceled it when it was done. It was ready to release. The game is finished, and they canceled it right before it came out because they said, look, we're not going to spend millions and millions of dollars trying to hold this thing up for so many seasons just to see if it pans out. We're just canceling the thing. Like that was it. They shelved the game. There were no servers for it to connect to then after the betas. That was it. So I think about Last of Us Online being obviously a sore spot for a lot of PlayStation owners now, or fans of Last of Us. Just see what that would have been. What if that game, rather than trying to be a big live service push, they had obviously a vision for this connected world. What if it was like that multiplayer mode, and it was just that? It was like a connected world. You could kind of go and do what you want in a sandbox, maybe with some friends or something, and run around, complete some missions or whatever. And then they had a single player component that was similar in size to like Uncharted Lost Legacy, something like that. Like 6-7 hours. It's this little single player game mode, and then the multiplayer is attached to it, and that we feel like is worth the $70 that they try to get.
It's an interesting proposition, and that's probably one that maybe would have been easier to justify if that's what they knew it was going to be going into it.
Yeah.
But it's like you can't just rework it to be that once they've maybe spent 4 years making it something that's clearly just a live service based. Look, every time The Last of Us comes up, I'm very firm on this. Not a live service guy. That one would have worked. It just would have.
I was curious.
It's such a strong property. Like the HBO show did amazing. It's like if you do it with it's like obviously we say, oh, it's like an Extraction style, sort of game, but it's like if you also like incorporate like what GTA Online does, which is like recurring characters and story elements that play out, and it's just like I firmly believe like that would have been probably a gargantuan cash cow that would have easily, I don't want to say easily, but like I think that had the best chance of taking off. But clearly Naughty Dog understood at that point, it's a matter of like, okay, well, we've got a fork in the road here. So like that's a good segue to our next story about this, right? So like that was another portion that came out of the Bungie aftermath was just like a casual Twitter thread, right? So somebody was asking Jason Schreier, like, they said, like, can you drop a story about how a studio that hasn't made a good game since 2010 can tell Naughty Dog, a studio that makes critically acclaimed games, to cancel a project? And then Jason said, like, that's not what happened. And then he reiterates saying that Bungie gave Naughty Dog feedback and Naughty Dog found that feedback helpful. I think people are still kind of hung up on this whole idea that like once Bungie was in-house at SIE, that they had final say on all these projects and just like said, cancel it. But their goal was to give feedback on these projects and just basically say, here's our concerns based on our experience. And from that point, it seems like it was a mutual decision between Sony and that particular studio. Now, in some cases, obviously, SI is the parent company, so we saw like them just kill London Studio or Firesprite. But I would assume Naughty Dog has a lot more agency in that kind of a that big of a decision. And considering we just mentioned like 850 people, and that seems to be the head count for 2 games. Naughty Dog's got about 400 something staff, if I remember correctly. It's always a floating number of a few hundred. It's a lot, but that still like isn't necessarily enough to maintain Last of Us multiplayer and single player.
Yeah, my thing is, I feel like they got the game going. They're like, all right, this is looking good, and they did what Naughty Dog does, and it was highly polished. It looked great from their perspective as we make these single player narrative driven experiences, and this is going to be one that it's going to be online, yes, but it'll at least rival some of the stuff we've done with The Last of Us and Last of Us Part 2 leading up to this. And then Bungie looked at it and said, that's really, really good. Now extrapolate that out over the next 5 years of you doing seasons, and that's all you're going to be doing for that whole time. And they probably went, oh, well, we don't want to do that. So like I do kind of think that the vision, I guess, maybe was put in front of them, because Neil Druckmann talked about it, right, with Jeff Keighley, and was like, look at this is gonna be really cool, this interconnected world, this thing you can do, and it's gonna take Last of Us next level. Maybe they were, that vision, that challenge was placed in front of them, but they're not this big live service multiplayer studio. And Sony, maybe they leaned a bit on them with the pitch, like, hey, we're trying to figure out a live service game here, a couple of them, why don't you take a shot at it? And they got it done, but they weren't ready for post-release. I just feel like that's probably what Bungie told them. Hey, look, we've been doing this for this long. Look how many of us it takes. Look how much it costs. And our stuff is not necessarily on the level as yours when it comes to the animation and the little details you like to do. And it costs us a fortune. Don't tell Sony, but our burn rate's higher than the amount we take in. I feel like they're like, yeah, don't do that. That's not a good idea. You're gonna have to scale this back, and you're not going to be making any Uncharted's or anything in the future. Last of Us Part 3 is shelved, and whatever that new IP you have going on, go ahead and shelve that too. And it's a shame, because I would have just liked to have seen them go, can we rework Last of Us Online and just make it a multiplayer thing that's closed off, and we just put it out there, and that's it. It's $40, whatever. I wouldn't have minded that, but I guess maybe, as you're mentioning, they started from the beginning as it being this live service, maybe battle pass driven, cosmetics, some kind of microtransactions attached to it, and it would have been impossible to rework it without basically tearing the whole thing down and rebuilding it.
Well, from what we know about it, I mean, it did start off as like a boxed multiplayer, because that was the whole point of like Part 2, is that it did have multiplayer, just like Part 1, obviously, but it became something bigger. Like that, this is like well documented within Naughty Dog. It's scope creep. They just keep tacking on more and more stuff. Obviously, this was during a time where SI is investing heavily in live service, so there's, it just tracks with like that's sort of the natural evolution of where that project was going to go. I think, once you're 4 or 5 years in, then thinking like, oh, maybe we should have considered this as more standard boxed multiplayer, or at the very minimum what you're suggesting, which is maybe a smaller single player campaign with multiplayer attached. And that would have been maybe a very compelling package. But at that point, you spent 4 years, approaching live service. It's just such I do hope we someday get a lot more insight into the real nitty gritty behind the development of that game and exactly where it went, because we're still trying to piece together, for the most part, what we think happened. But it's crazy, man. That's a lot of money they threw away, though. That was a big game.
Yeah, I guess they figured it's not worth. Maybe they could have reworked it, but then it's like, do we want to do this for another year just to rework this thing, or do we want to work on this new IP that we have in development right now?
Who knows how long it could have took to do that, right? Then it's like, obviously there's financial incentive to cancel it. There's certain tax breaks you're gonna get. You can write that off, and like that kind of is probably what they thought with Hyenas as well. Like, if you ship it, like you're committing to it. You're committing to the losses versus, okay, what's the outcome that loses the least amount of money? I'm almost surprised that, like, because Mark Cerny's often very close to these projects, and Mark Cerny's credited with one of like the most well-known sort of game design approaches, which is called method. A lot of developers call it Cerny method, but it's a matter of like approaching milestone builds of the game and not being afraid to cancel. Like, he's very open about this. He's like, cancel. If it doesn't matter if it's 20 million you put in, 30 million, even if you get up to 50 million, cancel it. Because if you ship it and that 50 turned into 150,
right?
It's like, so I'm almost surprised it maybe wasn't canceled sooner, but it still lines up with like once Bungie was on board, they probably a mix of everything, right? The feedback and then SIE also seeing Bungie and going, oh my God, what are you guys doing? Your
Yeah,
own
I feel like
studios.
no matter how much it's explained either way, like Jason Schreier clearly has an idea as to what went on there and he's trying to convey it. Even if he lined it out perfectly to everyone, like the ongoing stuff that happened for this, people are still going to attach Bungie to that cancellation.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean,
see it as it's Bungie's fault. Well, I got canceled kind of thing.
not to split hairs, but it's like, obviously it still lines up in that way. So if people really want to act like it's their fault, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's a timeline where we got the game and Sony did not acquire Bungie. That would have been
Hey, 3.5 billion line, would have been out there for games. So I mean, they would have been able to hold it up, but Naughty Dog either would have had grown to the size of Bungie, maybe like they would have doubled in size just to make this all work. I don't know. That seems like a lot to ask. Maybe the idea of maybe they could use the assets or other parts of this multiplayer, and Last of Us Part 3 comes out and it has a multiplayer component and it's a single player release, but then a multiplayer tacked on and that's it.
Well, that's the other part too, is like salvaging what they made, right? Because it sounds like they pretty much built San Francisco on that engine. Mm-hmm. Like that's just a lot of stuff to throw away. You have to imagine that's going into something. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't. I don't think they're throwing it all away. I feel like that is lined up perfectly for whenever Last of Us Part 3 comes out, for these assets to show up in it, or animations, whatever they did. You mentioned they developed like the whole San Francisco, the world area they're going to use. Maybe that finds its way in and we have single player and multiplayer. I think that would be pretty cool.
Maybe. Hey, the good thing is the outcome we got is single player games. The thing that people constantly bitch about and don't seem to realize that most of their studios are still doing single player.
Well, they need to start showing them.
That is the problem. Yes.
I think when they show them, people are very excited, but we're in this weird holding pattern where everyone's like, look, Astrobot looks cool. I'm excited. Concord's here. Anything else? I think people are just like, look, like, come on, no, come on, do something. Come on, Sucker Punch, do something.
Poking the stick at the studios. Come on.
Look, they're going to have that showcase eventually. They're going to go off. People are going to be really excited. It's just that we're in that weird holding period right now, just waiting.
Yeah.
Next month. Come on, Sony. Next month.
Well, in the meantime, John, let's talk about the fiscal report, because that was one portion that we just kind of glossed over. So some of the numbers that we got for this quarter, because this would have run from April 1st to June 30th. This is 2024 Q1 earnings. So they sold 2.4 million PlayStation 5 consoles. That is down from 3.3 year over year. But PS5 consoles have now reached a worldwide total of 61.8 million. Monthly active users is 116 million. That's slightly down from Q4, but still up from Q1's 108 million year over year. The digital software ratio I thought was worth pointing out here, because during this quarter, it reached a brand new high of 80%. So that's 80% primarily digital. Their earnings were up.
That would hurt.
Yeah. that's higher than the COVID peaks. I checked the previous quarters. That is the highest they've seen so far.
That one's sting a bit. Really like this.
Like they're
Pascal. You're like, yeah. I see. That's how I figure you read it, and you're just like hunched over, like
I was.
Yeah, it's exactly how I pictured you reading that report.
Okay, their earnings sales are up 12% year on year, thanks to foreign exchange rates, increase in sales of first-party software, and an increase in sales from the network, mainly PlayStation Plus. Operating income had a big 33% increase. That's primarily driven by the same reasons, but that one also includes an increase of sales of PS5 accessories. So the Portal is out there carrying some weight. So with both of those in mind, they did a minor revision to their fiscal year forecast, where both sales and their operating income are expected to be 3% stronger. Nothing too crazy there, but they just expect a little bit more. I guess the angle here that people are examining, right, is PS5 console sales, because as we've mentioned before, they're over the bell curve, like they've peaked. So now they're expecting console sales to slowly decline year over year at this point. The sort of regional thing we can examine here is that for the US, they're still trending 7% ahead of PS4 on a launch line basis. Europe, they're falling behind. I don't know if you saw this one metric, but it's the UK where PlayStation 5 finally hit 4 million sold there. And that's actually 33 weeks slower than PlayStation 4, which is not a small amount of time, by the way. 33 weeks slower than PS4.
Yeah, they're 1.5 million globally behind the PS4 currently, I believe is what was reported. They're ahead of the PS4 in the US right now, though, which is interesting. I mean, that's what they're focusing a lot of their time right now, is the US specifically for sales. So, you know what? I still think that Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to somewhat define how the PS5 does when it's all said and done. As weird as that, I think next year when that launches, we're going to find out a lot about how strong these next gen systems are.
I'm curious as to if it could, sort of subvert the expectation of decaying console sales, because it's still like, that's still close enough, right? This wouldn't be year 6 of PS5. Like, it's, 2025 is still very close to what was a peak year. So I'm very curious as to if that game, which is expected to be like the biggest entertainment launch that we've seen in 20, 30 years, maybe ever. So it's like, surely that is maybe going to sell enough PlayStation 5s to where they might actually like hit a new peak, or maybe just
I think so. I think they'll reverse that bell curve a little bit.
What's weird though is that they're not, I guess it's hard to say for sure if they've already accounted for that in the forecast, because that technically would go into, I believe, that quarter where they're expecting that game to ship, because
they're expecting that. So GTA 6, they Take-Two did mention they're doubling down, looking at holiday 2025 most likely. I think I'm thinking September, October.
I said fall, didn't they?
I'm thinking there's going to be like that September time, because they released GTA. Oh gosh, feels like forever ago now. GTA 5 when that came out on the PS3, and the 360, like right at the end of that generation. I believe that was like September. I think that is when that came out. Am I wrong? When did that come out? I'm thinking right in there, September, October, 2025.
Yeah, you know what? I'm thinking of what would be the next fiscal year, because this entire forecast only goes up to what would be March 2025.
March,
so yeah,
March, yeah,
we don't have a Sony forecast that includes the launch of that game. But yeah, I'm very curious. I mean, you got to figure that would be the game if it's going to like do something unusual for these consoles.
Yeah, GTA 5 came out September 2013 for PS3 and 360. I ran at like 20 frames per second.
God bless.
Yeah, hey, it's just a massive release still, but that's the thing is, by the time that comes out, we should have a PS5 Pro on the market. And I've mentioned this many times. One of Sony's biggest advantages right now is they are viewed as the default console for a lot of people. It's like if you want to play the new Madden, you get the new PlayStation. For a lot of people, that's just the way it is. If their friends are playing it. So I think GTA, and then that, by the way, we're talking about GTA 6. We're not even mentioning Grand Theft Auto Online, which is going to be a whole other level of ridiculous.
Yes, that's a good point. Do we know for certain if that's how are they going to do it like GTA 5? Like it's single player first, then the online comes after?
Do we know that? So I think it's gonna be staggered. Like I think they'll do that, and then because they did with Red Dead as well, Redemption 2. I think they're gonna do something similar here where they separate it somewhat. I think this new Grand Theft Auto Online is gonna have some really crazy stuff in there. And yes, it might be somewhat AI related, but I think they're going to go for like this living world. They'll lean into the role playing sector. I think there's going to be a lot going on there. And that alone, again, we talk about live services, that might become the new black hole game that they dub Fortnite and stuff. I think this would become that new one. So that's what we got. People keep talking about just GTA 6 single player, that multiplayer. I'm telling you, we watched GTA 5 run to, gosh, how much is that sold now? Like 180 million copies. It's something crazy, right? It's because of the online. It just keeps selling because you sell shark cards with the game sometimes. So
it's gargantuan.
And then also think about this, Ryan, with we believe that Sony's going to have a showcase here in the next, we'll just say couple months, that'll probably set up 2025.
Yep.
So
We
I think they're going to
expect that.
be, I think they're going to be hitting pretty hard next year with just a bunch of releases. I'm going to hopefully say one per quarter. I'm just putting that hopefully. And I mean, right now, look, I know Concord exists, but let's be real. It's Astrobot right now. That's kind of it. I mean, come on. And I think next year it's going to be a bit different. So that's the sales now. They were technically down from last year's quarter, right? As was mentioned. But I think next year they are going to have most likely a push in the opposite direction for the PS5. So it's going to look a little different on the graph than usual, but maybe a price drop even. Who knows? They might play around with that.
Well, that's the other big question is if this console's ever going to get an official price cut. I mean, they run sales. I mean, the sale they'll do is 50 off. So we know that they've got like some wiggle room, but if that'll ever be permanent, I'd be hard pressed to say that might not happen ever.
Yeah. Isn't it weird? Every generation we go through though, Ryan, and we go, okay, you know what? 3 years, maybe I'll check the system out because it'll be $100 cheaper, something like, and the library will be established. We saw the prices go up for the PS5. Technically, that digital version went up $50 to $450.
Yeah,
and then they put it on sale for $400. And everyone's like, "Oh, finally, it's on sale."
it's such a different marketplace, man. It's like Switch is the biggest one. Like it's the most affordable, sure, but it's been $300 since 2017.
They went up $50 like, the OLED, $350.
It's a very unusual marketplace. We're never going to have it ever again. Like you'll never get like a PS2 priced at $150 ever again.
I hate it. Those are the good days. Yo, when you walked into the store and you looked right and there was a GameCube at $100 and you looked left and there was a PS2 at $150.
Dude, they'd be like stacked in the middle aisle of a Walmart. You could just like grab them.
They're like, it's the same price as the toaster. Just put it in the aisle. Who cares?
Yeah, like it's crazy.
Okay, cool.
It'll never happen again.
No one. Yeah, a lot of the kids now aren't going to know that you would walk into the store and you'd be able to just pick the box of the system up and look around it, and like they had all the different colors and the silver PS2, the black PS2, the indigo GameCube. You just walk up and be like, I kind of want the silver. I don't know. You're like looking around the box and stuff. And now you got to like go through 4 waves of security to get them to open the glass to get the PS5 out.
They really were put in the center aisle, like just a bunch of like old tube TVs that nobody picks up.
Yeah.
It's crazy stuff.
Great times. Man.
All right. Let's move on to PSVR 2, huh? We had a very weird thing pop up. I think it's weird, which is this Japanese publication, AV Watch. They did a report on the new PSVR 2 PC adapter, which is now out. So if you want to use your VR2 on a PC, you can finally do it. So they were talking with Sony about the new device and their PC support. It was just a spokesperson. Whoever this was, they went unnamed. But and this is via translation, by the way, so it was all in Japanese. But the translation we do have, that just the basic one that Google will spit out, pretty much says that Sony was planning on doing PC support the entire time. So the quote here reads, and I quote here, "The importance of PC connection was recognized even within the PSVR 2 development team, and PC connection was also taken into consideration when the design of PSVR 2 began. On the release date of PSVR 2, we first worked on optimizing the VR experience when connected to a PS5, and then accelerated development of PC compatibility after the release." So I don't know about you. I don't fully believe that, if only because I think if the headset was doing a lot better, they probably would not enable it. And the timeline doesn't really work out here, right? Because
what was this publication called?
AV Watch.
Take a look at this. Go ahead.
Well, so like the thing with the PC adapter is that if you have a GPU with a virtual link port, then you actually don't need the adapter, because that was a proposed connection standard back in like 2017, 18 or something like that. It was like a few years ago now at this point, but that was like a proposed one connection standard for like various PC VR headsets. The problem is that never took off, and Virtual Link like died in mid 2020. PSVR 2 came out in 2023. Now, one might think like, oh, maybe Sony was planning on doing this the whole time, and they were like gonna jump on board with this proposed standard. It's not like they haven't done that before. Like they were there at the beginning with like Blu-ray on PlayStation 3 before Blu-ray was the chosen storage medium. But the timing is just maybe it's just a little too off, right? Like to think that virtual link was like for sure going to be the standard, and they would always have this in their back pocket of like, oh
Right.
yeah, we're going to support PC. So I don't know, like maybe it's like they were too far in and they couldn't, figure out a different connection medium. And obviously if it's primarily for PlayStation 5, who cares? It's the one single USB-C port. But
yeah, because they dropped that after the 20 series. So with like the 30 series, NVIDIA had completely dropped it, and that the 30 series came out at the end of 2020.
Yeah, it's just I don't know if it's like just off enough to where I'm like, I don't know if you were always planning on doing this. Maybe it could have been something where it's like, okay, that's the proposed standard. So we'll support it too, but we will have a bunch of encryption layers to make sure people can't can't use it. God forbid our headset actually is really successful. I don't know. I'm not fully buying that they wanted to support PC.
I feel like if they wanted to support PC, all the features would be working right now too for it.
That's what it feels very cobbled together, doesn't it? I mean, obviously they have to because the single USB-C cable carries 12-volt power, display data, USB 3.0 data. Like, so you need the adapter if you want to use it on PC. So there's no getting around that. Obviously, the virtual link did not take off. But it's like, okay, why do none of the features work? Like, you couldn't get that going? Were you really like developing that the entire time? Because the other angle of it is like we were expecting that maybe they will update the PC app and just give this thing whatever sort of drivers and API access it needs for a lot of those features to work. So maybe that's still coming, but it's like, why did you not do that, as quick as you could? Why did you not talk about PC support maybe a bit sooner? Because I like cannibalizing the idea of like, oh, they can't say that at launch because then people won't buy it for their PS5. It's like, I don't know if I buy that either.
I don't know. The whole thing does seem weird with the timeline and the lack of features, and I don't know. I don't know if I buy that either.
I think it's like the benefit of the doubt I'll give them is that maybe they were planning on this, but it's like a demand trigger. Like we won't pull it unless
it needs to. Yeah.
So look, it's in our back pocket, but if it's if the headset's doing fine, then we won't support it. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, they are much more supportive of PC nowadays versus even just 5-6 years ago. So I mean, I could be wrong, but the timing just seems very weird to me.
Well, the PC launch seemed to at least have a good effect on their headset. So
yeah, I mean the sale did great. They sold a lot more headsets just based off of like a percentage because we know that number they're coming off of was probably terrible. Did you see Half-Life Alyx was actually on sale too? Like right when the PC adapter came out.
That's how you do it. That's how you do it.
Like
Half-Life Alyx is they've been showing that game, marketing it in their own press release. That's not on PlayStation. I cannot believe still that they have not gotten that game to PlayStation 5. Man,
it's got to be Valve. It stops with them.
It has to be, yeah, because they want to obviously sell their own VR headset. But
I mean, if they're willing to fund Firewall Ultra, I can't picture a world where they were not willing to fund some other studio to port over Alyx. So
oh, sure.
Yeah. Probably Valve. All right, let's move on to Square Enix. I thought this was interesting because they also had an earnings report come out, and the contentious topic surrounding Rebirth has always been its sales, its exclusivity, how well did it do on PlayStation 5. And unsurprisingly, Square did not say a single thing about how many copies of the game they sold. They also posted an 18.4% decline in game sales for the last quarter, and that would have included when Rebirth was being sold. But Square did report a profit, which we can piece together from the restructuring that they were planning on doing anyway, because they canceled like a bunch of stuff internally and moving stuff around. So like they pretty much turned a profit by gutting a ton of stuff.
Yeah, they technically did turn a profit though. So.
Square's got their own can of worms. I think it's pretty clear now at this point. Rebirth is not doing what they thought it would.
I kind of think 16 is doing better than Rebirth right now, and that they got to be looking at that like, hold on a minute, how is this happening? Because remember all the backlash for 16 because it was more of a quote unquote action game. It wasn't the traditional turn-based, even though we kind of lost that with 15 anyway.
Yeah,
still it was Devil May Cry kind of gameplay, and people were like, no, I don't want that. I think Rebirth, I don't know what is going on there with those. Maybe it really is. So I was coming up with a few different reasons why. One, if you didn't buy Remake, you're not going to buy Rebirth. You're going to go get Remake, realize how long it is, and be like, I'll get to it eventually. And then you're just not going to buy Rebirth right now. Yeah. And the other one is, there are probably plenty of people who are turned off by Final Fantasy Remake story and the changes they made. And they're like, oh, this isn't what I thought it would be. I don't really want to keep going with this. Or maybe I'll check in when it's on sale and it's like $20 or something. I do think that is a factor as well, because I don't think Final Fantasy VII Remake necessarily did the kind of numbers that even Square was expecting. I kind of think they were expecting it to actually hit a bit higher in terms of sales. Like they might have been thinking
Remake.
Yeah, they might have been thinking Final Fantasy 15 numbers.
Whoa. Well, Remake did really well, but Remake also was a consequence of COVID. You know, like that could not have worked out any better for them, I think. That was like right when the lockdowns happened and it was the first entry.
Yeah, I wonder about that, because I've at times heard the opposite, that they were like, we thought I did a little more than that, but it's not like I don't think they lost money on it or anything, but I kind of feel like they looked at the number and been like, it's taking longer than we thought to get to like a 5 million mark we can celebrate. And I kind of feel like they looked at that as, well, it's Final Fantasy 7. It's going to outsell things like 15. We're going to get to PC. It's going to do more copies there. And it just, I was the last reported sales figure they had, because last I saw was like 5 million or something.
For 7?
Yeah, 7 Remake.
Oh, that I can't remember. We could check real quick. But
7 million.
7 million. Yeah, I mean that seems like a pretty high number given just typically what Square does. But then again, like that's always the running joke with Square. A game will sell 5 million and they'll say it's a disappointment.
That's what I mean. Like when you see like them say, the Tomb Raider series just wasn't good enough, and it's like, really, that's like 30 some odd million in 3 entries, right? That wasn't enough. But then you think Final Fantasy 7 and the legendary status of that, and that is, to me, when I look at 7, I do think of that break glass moment of, we need an incredible game right now, something that we know should sell. That's the one you break the glass to get to. But Rebirth, man, it's just not off to, it just is not doing they should be bragging about Rebirth right now, how well it's doing it. It's just not, it's not doing it. It's very odd.
It's interesting how with 16, they did put out a number immediately, and the language in the reports at the time were like, yeah, like it did okay for us. Like but now it seems like that game doesn't have the legs they thought it would. So it did okay initially, but now it's kind of like complete. Well, I mean, all games drop off significantly after like the first week of sales, but it just seems like even that sort of like trickle effect they're just not getting from that game. And Rebirth straight up didn't even do all that well right from the very onset, which, I mean, Rebirth was still up against so many things anyway. To your point, like some people didn't play Remake. Some might not have liked how Remake played out. It also shipped during just a different economic time, which is people are being a bit more careful with their spending. They're not going crazy with COVID spending and everything. So it just seems like the game is getting hit with all these hurdles outside of just also it might be a contentious entry as well.
Right. Yeah, I think it's possible that's the case. Or some people might just be waiting for all 3 and they're like, I'll get them all when they're all out. And it's like, well, hold on. If you don't buy the Rebirth, they're not going to make the next one. So.
I got a buddy that's his thing right now. He's like, I'll just wait for the 3rd one. He's like, you think they'll repackage it? I'm like, they'll repackage this game as many times as they possibly can. So I'm like, no doubt in my mind on PlayStation 6, you're going to have like a multi-disc compilation of this thing.
They are going to re-release this thing over and over again. Whatever contract is there behind the scenes with Sony, if that ever runs up, hey, guess what? Final Fantasy 7 Remake and Rebirth and whatever the next one is, Redemption or whatever. Hey, it's on the next Nintendo system too. Congratulations. There it is. They're putting it everywhere they can, right? Just try to get those numbers up. And then I think there will come a day eventually where they're like, hey, Final Fantasy 7 Remake, 10 million copies. We got there. It's 2033, but we did it.
I don't know if they would say that like how many years later, but
but we get sales updates sometimes for Nier Automata.
That's true.
It's like random. It's like, oh, okay. Thanks for telling me that.
That's solid point. You're right. I agree. If they have an out like to ship it somewhere, like they're gonna take it full. There's no way, because it was probably something that was easy for them to agree to back in what would have been 2014, 2015, whenever the deal was initially signed. Yes. Sure, it was an easier thing to agree to back then, but if they have some kind of out, they'll take it coming up probably. And I think Sony would be happy letting it go.
I will also say about their numbers for Square Enix, what they reported here. There was an interesting line I saw from Daniel Ahmed. I don't know if you saw this over on Twitter X, because they were replying to people who were discussing the Square stuff. They mentioned that less than 1% of the income that was reported, or like operating income from Square, was from like their HD games, quote unquote. Everything else was from their MMO, their cell phone games, that kind of thing. So I was like, wow, really? That's how little of an impact that the HD games that we all look towards for Square really played here.
No, I didn't see that. Less than 1%. That
Let me see if we
sounds
can pull up the tweet for it.
that sounds so bizarre, because why would they even do it then? Right? Because if the HD game segment is that little, because that would include even just like other run of the mill stuff like Visions, right? Like Visions, like why even do that game then?
Yeah,
You know
I
what I
can
mean?
probably. I'm scrolling now to see if I can find it. Yeah, that one caught me off guard though when I saw it. I said, "Wow,
I mean,
really?"
you'd expect the split would favor the highly profitable stuff, but less than one sounds kind of nutty.
That's what I thought when I saw it. I was like, "Wow, it's that low." Because there were headlines made about it. Other people were shocked by by it too when they saw it.
Was this recent or like?
Yeah, it was when the reports came out. Here it is.
Uh,
Okay. They said the main takeaway from the report is that the only reason Square Enix's digital entertainment business is profitable right now is because of its MMO and mobile titles. 68.4% of operating profit from MMO games, 31.1% from mobile games, 0.5% from non-MMO PC and console games.
that's crazy.
Right? That's what I saw. I was like, wow, it's really like that right now over at Square. Yeah, that's kind of where they are right now.
That's nuts. Any
But
company,
you know what?
any company would like just cancel that immediately.
But you know what? The bright side here is they're profitable without the HD games releasing and trying to rack up a bunch of sales. So if they can keep a baseline like this, and then they do get that big release of the next Final Fantasy 7 or Final Fantasy 17 or Dragon Quest or whatever, right? They can throw out there, then they should see some pretty good results on their report.
Well, one would expect. I mean, I don't know. The good news is you no longer have to spend $1,000 on Final Fantasy 1 through 6 on disc.
Is that how crazy it got online? I didn't even look to see what the prices were.
Well, John, I'll let you know that I do have a copy, and last time I checked, it was like over 1,000. I'm sure
It's like that, huh?
they
Wow.
well they
Oh, you have
they were
the big box.
no, I have just a standard PS4 copy.
Okay.
Last time I checked, I think they were selling for like 700. Either way, it's like, yeah.
That's crazy.
To recap for those that don't know, when Square Enix put up pre-orders for Final Fantasy, the Pixel remasters, on PlayStation 4 and Switch for a physical copy, it was a Sunday night, or Sunday morning, I should say, like 2 a.m. The game was $75, but their shipping was $25. I remember this so well because it was like such a weird thing that popped up, and everyone would follow the link and be like, "Oh," even if you saw it at the time, you'd be like, $100 to get this thing shipped to me. Like, I'm not buying that. So everyone just kind of like waited, but like within an hour, it was sold out. And that was the only way to get an ESRB copy of both of those games. Now, on the PlayStation side of things, John, that was your only opportunity, because Switch did get a Asia English print on PlayAsia. So that's the copy that a lot of people have on Switch. But PS4, they actually did put one up initially for pre-order, and then they canceled it because that game wasn't going to get an Asia English. Oh my God, I slur my ass like crazy. That was canceled. The point is, so now the only ESRB copy was that, right? So the good news here is that there's a reprint. They slightly changed the box art. It's Final Fantasy 1 through 6 Anniversary Edition.
Oh, good. I
Yeah.
need to know who has that version so I can shame them when they show it off.
Right. Yeah. Well, now either way, there's a physical print up for pre-order. It's on Square. It's on Best Buy, Target. I think it's like everywhere. Last time I checked, but still the same price at 75. But if you get shipping from like a normal retailer, you don't have to pay Square's weird shipping. That's coming out October 8th. I thought that was kind of That was worth saying because that was a very weird physical print.
Square's a weird company a lot of times. I don't they randomly just post this on their website, release it. You mentioned even on like a Sunday night or something. Hey, the burrito's alive. It's like, what? And it's like, here's a big box thing for a couple $100. Just a regular one for standard price. Oh, and actually, no, it was like 85 or something like that, right? It was a little more.
It was 75 and then 25 shipping. Like you couldn't.
Yeah, that's what
it didn't
was,
matter.
Yeah.
It didn't matter where you lived. 25 shipping. $100. Like I remember it so well.
$5 like a little bubble mailer thing,
dude. I remember it's ingrained in my head. The Wario 64 tweet, pre-orders live, all the replies, 25 shipping. All the replies were like, I'm not buying this. Little did they know that was their time to invest in fucking Apple in 98. Like that
apparently.
Was their you know what I mean? Like it was crazy. But value is ruined. Stock market plummeting here. So new reprint, good stuff. Go get your 1 through 6.
I wonder if this can be in stores too, in retail stores.
Like on the shelf or just like fulfilled on, you would assume so, right? I mean,
maybe that's the next wave. They'll finally show up in retail store. Like Square's strange. This should have just been a big release for them. They should have built it up and then probably made a ton of money. I mean, they made money from it, but like probably a ton of money.
You know, the whole thing is weird because they shipped it on PC and mobile first.
Yeah, like, I don't know what's Square's console over there sometimes. It's very strange.
I don't know, man. One thing's for certain, Square apparently hates money. Moving on to our next story.
Good collection, though. I do recommend the collection.
Santa Monica. Sony Santa Monica, making its first new IP in over 20 years. This was a very big headline this past week. What happened here was a developer at Santa Monica had this listed on their LinkedIn, where it said they've been working at the studio, looking after their entire character development pipeline on their new IP. And that's the language there, new IP. If you check back to like previous job postings at Santa Monica and whenever they've talked about this other game that they're working on, because they were never like, this was like not a secret. Like they would always talk about like, we have job postings for an unannounced IP or an unannounced game, I should say, right? Very particular language. This was during Ragnarok being in development, but this is the first time I believe where we've seen them call it a new IP, which we always assumed anyway, because the TLDR here is that we think Cory Barlog's working on some other project at the studio.
Right.
The thing is, he's got a creative director role on Ragnarok, but that's like more of because he's like creative director for like the whole studio. Basically, he more or less had a very basic advisory role on Ragnarok. So he didn't really work on the game per se. That was primarily Eric Williams. So he's been what we think is very busy on this new IP. And that's the big deal here is that, Santa Monica hasn't made a new IP since Kinetica on PlayStation 2. So it's been a very long time. And they had like that race-based game during the PlayStation 4 cycle. That one was canceled. That was going to be a new shot at something different. But this one might go all the way through. So how are we feeling about this one, John?
I like the idea of a new IP for them, especially after wrapping up Ragnarok now. And they could still technically do, like a lot of people assume they would do some sort of spin-off or like a side story, like a Lost Legacy, maybe size project with Atreus. Or I feel like right now is the time to put, I don't want to say on the shelf, but like God of War kind of on the back burner a bit and revisit that on the PS7. Give a little bit of time in there for like the mainline one. And then I like the idea of them exploring a new IP. I'm curious the direction they go in. Is this, because we see them obviously with Ragnarok, do they then turn around and go towards sci-fi? Like, do they go into space or do something else it might still be kind of like out there a bit, maybe very fantastical, but is it just a completely different feel to it compared to the setting for Ragnarok? That's what I'm curious about, is how would their skills that they've really attained with Ragnarok transfer over to something way out there like a Star Trek or something?
Yeah, the running theory is that it's a sci-fi game, which would be very different for the studio. But that's the exciting prospect. I mean, there's no arguing it. It's been 20 years. Like, it would be nice to see them try something different. And like, it's like God of War's not going anywhere. So they're probably going to try and navigate how to turn into a two game studio basically. So, I mean, I would presume like this one's next. And also you've got, a handful of people in that early concept stage for what's going to be the next mainline God of War and what that's going to look like. If there is some sort of maybe spin-off Atreus game or something, maybe that's like a co-collaboration project with somebody else. That's still a running theory too. So, but it sounds like this one is lined up to be next. We just don't know exactly, like how far along are we talking here? Is this like we'll see this on PlayStation 5 kind of thing? Is this like we'll see it revealed in the next year and a half, 2 years? Like that's what we don't know.
I think I said PS7. I'm at PS6. Like 2028. Like if you wait till after the next generation at least launches, and it could still be cross-gen, that's when I wouldn't mind seeing them go back and doing that mainline God of War, which at this rate, as you mentioned, if they're working on conceptual stuff for the next God of War, that might actually line up with how long it takes to make some of these games now. So it could be like a 2029 release or something like that. We saw Insomniac plan out to like 2030 something.
Yeah. So you don't think they are going to try to turn into a two game studio?
No, I actually think it'd be a good idea to do that with the new IP and then also work on God of War as well. But I kind of view God of War because I mean, I would see this as like the next big jump for them. Like we had God of War 2018, where that was like a completely different kind of God of War. They did Ragnarok. Yes, it still obviously leaned into everything they did with 2018. Still a bit different, but like I'm expecting some sort of sizable gameplay change when they do the next big God of War. Like I assume next generation. Like if they go to a new setting, like different type of mythology, you change it up somewhat again when it comes to the gameplay or for example, they moved from the camera was pretty high up, more action oriented, faster with Kratos all over the place. With the older God of Wars, they get up to 2018. Camera comes much closer to Kratos. They don't do any cuts or anything throughout the whole game. They made it more personal with it, obviously him and his son and stuff going through. I kind of feel like they then change it up again for the next gameplay. I feel like that would take a lot longer to figure out. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe that's a 2026 or sorry, PS6 2028, 2029 sort of release, something that maybe is in that first launch year. You kind of launch with the idea that there is a God of War coming and this is going to be this next big evolutionary leap for the series.
Yeah, I would anticipate that was probably the game plan. Which means that, yeah, I mean, if they have to establish a whole new setting, which they're probably going to, and
well, you can still have that Atreus game. I think you can still do your Lost Legacy Atreus game.
It depends on what they're doing with Kratos and Atreus at that point. Obviously, based on the events of like how Ragnarok played out, no spoilers, but it's just a matter of like it's going to be different. So they're going to do something with those characters in a way that would probably be a sort of reestablishment of what it means for that franchise. So I would agree. Probably something that's destined for PlayStation 6 at this point. But that's big news, 20 years.
Like the idea of sci-fi, though. Like the idea of sci-fi. Just see what they can pull off. Hopefully it's not that thing where they show up and they show it to us and it looks like a bunch of other space games. Let's be different. Let's do something weird, But that happens with these shows, right? Where it's like,
yeah,
I think I've seen this before and then I've seen this one and it's like they all start blending together. I hope they have some kind of wrinkle or something that they have in mind for it.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, I don't know if it's like a personal preference thing for me. I mean, I like sci-fi, but like a lot of like sci-fi properties they feel very samey to me because it is like just sort of a template of like space, planets, ships, alien races. Like I don't know. I have no idea if I'm sounding crazy or not, but like sometimes it all kind of like blends together in a way.
Oh, it does. It does. Yeah. I've seen many people mention that. Yeah, you're not the only one. it's very common.
I am curious to see what they'll do. They're a talented studio. It'll be very strange to see them finally do something new. But we saw Guerrilla do the same thing. Went from FPS to action adventure sci-fi. They were
and everyone seems to hate it apparently online.
Those are both sci-fi though, but they were still able to I think make that jump in a very graceful manner compared to other studios that maybe make that kind of pivot.
Here's the other interesting thing now. Going forward with Sony and these new IPs, you got to think, all right, so they're thinking about games, but also the idea of having other things outside of that media form. So you could do like movie, series, TV series, that kind of stuff as well alongside of it. So like there is a ton of upside to come up with a brand new intellectual property that catches on. So that there's a lot of room to grow with that.
Yeah.
It's very interesting time for them when it comes to creating a new property that they can then kind of spread out across all different forms of media.
Well, one thing's for certain, if they can establish a new property and it does well, you'll see a lot of it. They will
Oh yeah,
squeeze that they will squeeze that sponge.
they're
Let me
doing
tell
it
you.
with Horizon right now.
All right. God of War adjacent news here. We got some Ragnarok PC specs for those that are looking to play the game over there. Still coming out September 19th. Just run you down low end. GTX 1060 is going to do you just fine for 1080/30. High end RTX 4070. That's for native resolutions, but the game's still going to support DLSS 3.7, FSR 3.1, Intel XeSS 1.3. Did you see the storage minimum on this game? It's weird. It's like 190 gigabytes. It's like,
why is it 190 gigabytes?
Did you see this? It's crazy. That's super
I didn't
high.
see the storage size. I usually go and I look at like the video cards, the RAM, and all right, cool, great, I'm out. But the storage is 190 gigabytes.
I'm wondering if it's like by the time you install it, like it gets smaller. You know, some games do that, don't they? Where like they get a lot smaller. It's got to be that, right? It has to be.
It's like you download it and then it has to unpack and it ends up being twice the size and then it deletes what it had previously.
Yeah.
But yeah, that it could be something that's so strange.
190. I'm like, that's so steep. That's a ton.
Yeah, it is 190 gigabyte SSD. Wow.
They do recommend SSD for everything too. So wonder if the game has
that's coming up to like Call of Duty territory.
Yeah. I'm curious if it has any like I mean, the game's on PlayStation 4. It should not have any sort of hiccups on an HDD, but they do recommend SSD on every setting. And the other angle of it, and a little asterisk, you can't miss it on the Steam page, requires a PlayStation Network account. John, this is a single player game. I think they said, you know what? We took the L and it's over. PSN.
They're all in on it. Yeah, they want those active users.
Like if you go through a Helldivers 2 fiasco and no matter what you come out the other end the bad guy, I mean it's over. You just require it at that point.
Right.
So
it's they're getting those monthly active users. That's for sure. Well, they're trying to anyway. I think at this point, I know they're still playing around with Steam. If they're really going to do this with the login, just get a launcher out. Just do your PC launcher already. Just do it.
Well, you know what? I'm wondering if this is because this is the second PC game since Tsushima that, you know, like, is this one going to have the PlayStation overlay menu? Is it going to have the cross save or the cross progression with a shared trophy list? You'd imagine that's like going to happen now for every game going forward. So, I mean, somebody that plays primarily on PC is not going to give a shit about that at all, but at least it's there. All right, let's move on to Bloober Team, because we still have, like, this is a pretty high profile PS5 timed exclusive coming out. I think some people are forgetting this game is coming, but it is still on the way. And Bloober Team is reminding you, because the Bloober Team CEO is speaking with Rolling Stone, and they were asking fans to give the game a chance. So we have a quote here I thought was worth sharing. He says, "I am dreaming that gamers will trust us, but I realize that trust is earned through actions and not through words. So that's why we have a policy on not commenting on the specifics of the game and raising hopes. We want to show our ambitions through our work, so we can't ask for anything more than give us a chance." And yeah, that's pretty much all you can do, right? I feel like the studio is like feeling very nervous.
Oh yeah, they absolutely are, because Konami showed a trailer and they were like, I don't know why they showed that footage. Okay, that's not representative of the game. It's like they showed us the trailer. Konami did. What are you talking about? They were like desperate to try to be like, no, this game is actually better than you're seeing right now. And they showed it again, and people were still like, I don't know about this. So
you know what a weird comment was? You remember the comment they said where they were like fans were asking like, when are we going to see more of this game? When are we going to see more? And they said, well, don't look at us, ask Konami. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird to say, because you still like, you're making the game. Like Konami would like reach out and be like, hey, do you have some material for us? Like,
right.
And it's so weird how there's such a public spat with like the publisher for this game.
They're saying, you know, like, give it a try, trust, like, you trust us stuff. I still look at their library of games, their history, and there's not a lot that makes me go, well, yeah, obviously they did this game. Or like the one I remember most recently is The Medium, and that just, I did not like that game very much. It just wasn't a very good game. I don't know
I
what
don't
else to
think
tell
many
them.
people did.
Yeah, and the Layers of Fear, they did that, and I was like, okay, this game is different. It's weird, and I know Evan really liked it, and ever since then, it's been like, Blair Witch. Anyone really like that game? I don't think so. And then now they somehow end up with Silent Hill 2, and my fear is that it was just cheap for Konami to get Bloober Team, and that's where we are. That's it. It just
That's
feels
great.
like they're going, please try this game, and I don't want to say desperation is the word, but you might be right. There's like this weird spat with Konami, and maybe Bloober Team would have approached this entire run up to the game's release differently, but it does not sound like a confident CEO talking about a game right now.
No, I do want to say I'm sure everybody at the studio like is showing up to work and just doing their best and trying to handle this the best way that they feel they can do it. It's just like that they've got to feel so nervous.
Let me give you an example though of the view of Bloober Team right now. There was that whole thing that was happening with Nintendo and like the little trailer they put out there, right? The Smiling Man.
Yeah.
Did you see this? And people were like, "Oh, maybe this is Nintendo's Bloober Team game," and everyone was like, "No, no, it can't be Bloober Team. Don't let it be Bloober Team." And it's just the mention of them with a horror game, which is supposed to be their specialty, had people losing it. And I'm like, "Wow, they have Silent Hill too."
That's a bad reputation to have as a studio. It's not good. Not good.
I mean, if you get a classic like Silent Hill 2, people are immediately skeptical. They're like, "What are you doing? What, you're gonna mess this up?" Because it's a game that they remember through nostalgia. Like there's no way you're gonna be able to top the original. Like immediately they're just skeptical of you. And now it's like it's Bloober Team, and they're trying to convince you, like up front, "Hey, no, you can buy this game for $70. It's okay."
Well, you know what makes it even harder for a game like Silent Hill 2? Not even so much that it's like a cult classic and people like deeply love this game, but it's like it's the kind of older title that like it doesn't just need a little bit of reworking. Like it's like if you give somebody that like grew up playing games nowadays and you throw them Silent Hill 2, they're gonna hate it probably, or
Play
just
for
like
30 minutes and call it a day.
like the controls are and just the way they approach combat, like that game has to be updated and modernized. So it's like just by sheer virtue of what the game is, no matter what studio gets the game, like it's gonna get changed in a way that like is gonna be perhaps contentious to some. So it's like it was already sort of a losing battle with this game alone, I feel.
Yeah, unfortunately for them, they didn't draw the straw that was Metal Gear Solid 3, because that game is basically just getting the remake treatment outright. Like the game actually still plays pretty well. It's aged well. Silent Hill 2, as you mentioned, not so much. So there's so much work that has to be done to it that I feel like people who originally paid the game, no matter what, are going to be annoyed by it, and then newcomers might not even care about it. And that's, I think, one of the issues they're running into is they must be having a hard time getting pre-orders or something with the way they're talking. So this is going to be interesting. It comes out 2 months from now.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to say. Well, I mean, so far everything they've said so far has been kind of unusual, but to do that and have these public spats with your publisher is alarming in some way. All right, let's move on to kind of some, well, it's not bad news for PlayStation directly, but it was still like kind of a bittersweet moment. Ready at Dawn. So they were closed by Meta Reality Labs recently. Ready at Dawn, of course, a well-known former PlayStation second-party studio. They were never acquired. They were never owned by Sony, but they were always well known for the kind of games they put out. So they made, they used to be the portable studio for a long time, right? So they did Daxter on PSP, both God of War, so Chains of Olympus and Ghosts of Sparta. They did also handle the PlayStation 3 collection for those two games. And then Deformers was after. So the Order would have been next at that point. Which the Order at the time, 1886, was such a high-profile PlayStation 4 game. A lot of buzz going into that title. It looked gorgeous. The game still holds up today in a way that's incredibly impressive for that console on a Jaguar CPU. It's just kind of nutty how good that game looks. But it was also the kind of title where it came out. A lot of debate surrounding its price tag, how much gameplay you get out of it, and things like that. But the whole point of it is, eventually Sony severed ties with the studio. We never got a sequel. They never worked with them again. They went into VR. Meta acquired them in 2020. They did a bunch of like Lone Echo games. So they did a handful of VR titles that were well received. But as part of their recent ceiling budget, this was reported by Android Central. So I think they're the entire division's got like this budget ceiling that, like, no matter how much upside there is for a project, I guess no matter what, like they're not going to go over that budget. So it's like they were a victim of that, which they already had layoffs last year. I think it was, that was like a third of the studio were laid off. And that was like also where the founders left too. I think Rue left, and also Andrea Pacino. I'm pretty sure he left the studio at the same time, but it's just a big deal. It's been it kind of reignited the conversation surrounding Ready at Dawn. Should Sony have kept working with them? Should we have gotten a sequel again? Should they have acquired them? So, I mean, how do you feel about Ready at Dawn?
I do think it's a shame because did you see the mention that they at least had conceptualized and planned out what would have been next after the Order 1886, some sort of sequel? And I think Shinobi mentioned it on Twitter X that it was going to be a Assassin's Creed to Assassin's Creed 2 like leap, where it would have been that, okay, I understand what they're trying to do the first one. This is what they really want to do. This is their vision. This really took things to the next level. And it's a shame because all I can assume is the Order 1886 comes out, it gets crushed by critics. We got like a 60 something on Metacritic. And we know more and more now that is something that Sony looks at and values with the quality of their games. And look, it wasn't a game that necessarily came out that I remember that was like super buggy or all messed up or something at launch, like Days Gone was. Apparently that was the whole thing, but I don't think it hit the necessarily prestige that maybe was being looked for, because clearly they didn't work with Sony again after that. They went off and started doing Oculus Rift stuff, MetaQuest stuff. They get acquired by Meta, and then they make Lone Echo 2. And that was it. That was the end of it. That was the last thing they made. And I also think this goes into the VR stuff. Like, their future clearly hinged on if VR was going to be successful or not as soon as they were purchased by Meta. And we see what the market's like now. And unfortunately, so in an altered timeline, let's say that Sony said, you know what? Let's do it. Order 1886, the second one, whatever the sequel's going to be called. We're also going to buy you. We're going to bring you in-house. And you know what? If that doesn't work, you can pivot to this, or you try VR. If that doesn't work, you can pivot to this. There was nowhere to pivot inside Meta. The pivot was we're getting rid of you guys. That was it. So it's unfortunate because that's Ready at Dawn. I feel like there was a lot of potential for what they at least created with the Order 1886. I understand the criticisms around it, but you're right. I fired that game up on the PS4 when I did that. I did a video about the PS4, that weird system that was like this strange revision, kind of silent revision. That was one of the games I popped in there to test out the system. And after I changed compound and stuff, I was like, oh, okay, I know this game does beat up the PS4. It's a taxing game. It looks incredible. Still looked really good. It was kind of wild how good that game looked on like the original PS4. So it is one of those things where it feels like the potential was cut short with Ready at Dawn because of VR. So we could be mad at VR again for something.
Well, I mean, I'd argue you got to blame Sony. They didn't give him that second chance.
Yeah, that's true too.
This was pretty well known at the time. I mean, the game ends on a cliffhanger, and there were interviews like shortly after the game came out, and the sort of aftermath from the reviews. Like, we knew they wanted to do a sequel. We knew if I recall correctly, they were open about this, which was, yes, we want to like double down on gameplay going into the second game. That was like a big complaint. Like, the thing is, like, the game is not really inoffensive in the gameplay department. It's just very, very basic, right? It's not even it's not necessarily bad. It's just like, okay, like a big portion of that game, like right before it came out, was the whole like black bars and the cinematic feel and the frame rate, right? So, because that always comes up. But it was like a very gorgeous game, and it was sort of like obvious that that's kind of where a lot of the
it's very controlled. Your experience going through was very controlled.
That's where a lot of the energy was put into that game, which, you know, it's like there's some value in that, but just didn't turn out all that well. and so Sony agreed, and they didn't get another shot. What's interesting is that the alternate timeline here, I think they still, if like the second game didn't do any better, I'm not sure if they would have been afforded a pivot, because then the second game would come out around, gosh, that would be like late life cycle PS4. And that's right before PlayStation 5 comes out. That's where Sony started, well, one, acquiring studios, but also closing some studios. So I think they would have been on the chopping block if the second game did not take off. But, the thing I always come back to with The Order is that, like, it's such a good example of a game that it's like a victim to that $60, now $70 price tag. Because it's amazing how many times I see people talk about this game and go, we should have gotten a sequel. Nobody, fucking nobody was saying that in 2015. Nobody, John. And you want to know why? Because people playing it today are buying it for $5 goddamn.
That's true. That's true. That's a good point.
And they've heard for 5 years that the game's bad. And then they boot it up and go, this isn't bad at all for my $5. Right?
It's very cheap right now. You're right. It is.
It's I always think of that game when it, like, the price discussion comes into play, and the whole, that game should have got a sequel. They should have got a second chance. It's like, well, and I'm not saying people were wrong in 2015. Like, that might have been really hard for people to justify. Some people don't want to drop $60 on a 5 to 10 hour experience.
Yeah. Also, that the early part of the PS4, right, when it came out, right then, 2013, 2014, it wasn't like they had any, like, it wasn't like big release all over the place. It was like, it is an incredible run for it. It took a little while for the system to get rolling a bit there. And The Order was right there in 2015, a couple of years after this just came out. It was like, okay, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. And you're right. You got it. And you're like, okay, hold on a minute. I thought this was going to be a bit more involved. It looks cool. Like, it was great on my TV, but, like, I thought there'd be a bit, this is a video game, right? I thought it'd be a bit more to be happening here. So I understand that, but I liked the visuals were awesome. I did like the kind of the lore and the stuff they set up, but you're right. It ended almost with the promise of, we'll be back. And it just, they did not come back.
Yeah. It's a shame. I mean, I don't want to undermine their PSP stuff either. I love their PSP games. They're so good.
Like, I think there's something to be said about the transition that they had from portable to home console, if you really think about it, because you're right. They did God of War Ghost of Sparta. And then less than 5 years later, they had Order 1886 on the PS4.
Yeah, it's a big pivot. I mean, we also saw Ben do that in a way too for a little bit there. They did console stuff back on the PS1 days, but, from PS1, 2, and 3, and then doing a lot of portable stuff, and then pivoting to, like, a Days Gone on PS4. It's always a fascinating transition for some studios when they do that.
But they did Daxter, God of War Chains of Olympus. They went over and ported the Wii version of Akami, just, I guess, because. And then they came back and did God of War Ghost of Sparta, God of War Origins Collection. Then they set out new IP, Order 1886. So yeah. I think that's impressive.
Yeah, that Okami definitely kept some contract work and kept some money into the studio.
Hey.
Well, the VR stuff too, though. Like, their VR games were received very well. They're a talented team. They knew what they were doing.
The issue is, but I mean, honestly, musical chairs. When the music stopped, they were sitting in the VR chair, and I'm telling you, we talked about that. VR, just like, that's the big thing holding back the idea of the PSVR 2, and it's I don't know if it's a sector that's going to support some of these massive, ambitious projects like we see in, like, what Square calls HD gaming. VR, just it's just, I don't think there's enough there to hold up studios that have those kind of ambitions right now.
Well, it says a lot about Meta, where they were the ones that were, they were taking it hard with how much they were willing to spend. Like Sony, sure, they've got R&D and they're pumping money into VR and they're doing a lot, but it's not to the same degree Meta is doing. Like, they're willingly, like, lost leading in that sector to be the market leader eventually. And, even for a company like Meta, it gets to a certain point where it's just too much. I mean, it was billions that they were losing on Reality Labs. So,
yeah, I think they were maybe expecting a lot out of that Lone Echo 2 game as well, because they did Lone Echo 1 on the Oculus Rift. I'm like, all right, let's do Lone Echo 2. Let's do it.
I remember it being a big deal that Echo Arena was like shutting down. I think it was because it had like tens of thousands of active players, which for a VR game was like super high.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember that was getting shut down. That was a big deal at the time too.
That's a shame though. And again, that alternate timeline would have been really interesting to see.
Well, in more bad news.
Also, that is a really cool name for a studio, by the way. Ready at Dawn. That's a good name.
You like the name?
That's a real that's a real shame too. That is a great name.
It's a pretty sick name. I always enjoyed seeing it when I booted up a game on a PSP. All right, and more bad news though. Game Informer shut down by GameStop. This is a U.S. publication, 33-year run, traditional magazines. You'd go to a GameStop, give them your address, $12, then you'd get a gaming magazine. Yeah, they were just shut down randomly, like out of nowhere. That was announced on their the official Twitter account. I guess a lot of the staff didn't even know about it. They were like 70% into the next issue. And it's like, you know, kind of as bad as you expect it to be, where it's so abrupt. And there was like an AI written message, and well, it seems like it was an AI message. I don't know.
I saw that people were like,
let
me ask ChatGPT what they would do if you had to shut down Game Informer. And they came up with like a very similar message. It was just funny the way it was like, hold on a minute here, guys. But did you see that the staff managed to, I guess, get control or log into the Twitter account?
Just going to mention it. Yes, they try to like make a proper goodbye, right? Because like, God forbid humans do that when they're laid off. And they just closed the Twitter account.
just completely destroyed the Twitter account after that. Like, hold on.
Terrible. Absolutely.
That was
terrible.
Crazy.
That happened
like 2 hours later.
Yeah, the sites closed down, like the whole archive's gone. I mean, I'm sure you could way back like a ton of articles, but it's a crazy thing. 33-year run for that magazine. I mean, this is one of those things where like you and me could probably reminisce about this. I don't know. I mean, did you have any growing up? I mean, I certainly did.
I just remember selling them all the time at GameStop.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense.
Desperately trying to sell it at GameStop. Desperately. Do you have one? Do you have two? That's the real question now. Do you have 2 of them?
That's a good point. Yeah, you probably have a very unique perspective on this. So like what?
Well, they would also be like, you should read this at work. Okay. But then if you read it at work, you get in trouble. Wait a minute. They were trying to tell you got to keep up to date on the games. And they're like, but we have this magazine here that helps you keep up to date on them. But if you read like something like that while the cameras and stuff are around the store and they catch you like slacking off reading the magazine, you get like yelled at. It was so weird. Like district managers telling you one thing, store managers telling you it was all over the place, that store. But yeah, we would try to sell it all the time. And all it really was, if you look through it and kind of like, the way that obviously we try to do pre-orders all the time, you look through the magazine and you start to realize, oh, okay, this is one big advertisement for everything I'm trying to sell right now. And it was just sort of funny the way it lined up with what they were telling us to market and push at the time. And it's like, oh, okay, these games are all at the front of this month's issue. And it was interesting. I mean, they had articles in there that people there would genuinely be creative and write about, and interviews and previews and reviews, which is fine. But yeah, that was basically GameStop. The reason they kept them around for so long is they were able to try to advertise their products more through it. And unfortunately for printed media, it's not really as sought after anymore. And I have to imagine that GameStop, who's been, I mean, just getting a beat down over the last several years. And I know they're part of like the meme stock thing, but that's not necessarily based on the premise of they're a brick and mortar video game store that also has a magazine. So it was the fact that they were tied to GameStop was always a problem. Like it was a matter of time, with that whole thing. But way back in the day, Game Informer was fun to get in the mail and check out until I saw the corporate side.
Yeah, I totally forgot like the perspective you would have on this. For me, it really was something where like, and like I never loved GameStop, but I do have like the memories that anybody would have around here, which is, that was the game store. Mm-hmm. So, you'd go there, they're always on the rack, you'd thumb through it. And, sometimes you would have the year subscription because it was like pretty affordable and you could just pay for it at the register. And or you just have an issue here and there. And like in the early like 2000s, where like internet was not super huge, and you might not have had like a reliable internet connection at home. Like that was like the primary way to learn about a lot of video games back then.
Mhm.
So, I mean, obviously, like I don't have a subscription. I haven't had one for God, I don't even know how long it's been. But like they modernized, they have a website, so it's like they were still like a pretty relevant publication, all things considered. So
Did you see that people were pointing all these things out about the website? Like one was that Dragon Age had the marketing. Well, like Game Informer had a lot of exclusive interviews with them, and then it just got nuked off the face of the internet. So like all those articles and exclusives that Game Informer had with Dragon Age that again helps market Dragon Age are just gone now. So it's like they did all this marketing, all these interviews, all this run up for it to come out this year, and now all that's gone.
It's crazy, dude. I feel bad for the staff. It's just, why does it always have to happen like that? Or it's just so abrupt, and
that was so weird. How abrupt it was just strange.
It's just shitty, man. It's just I mean, the thing is, like, you could probably speak more on this than I can, but it's how often I hear about just terrible things from corporate. And not even so much like corporate, but also it just trickles down everywhere. I hear bad things about district managers, about individual stores and how they're ran. Like, is there anything good that can be said about working there ever?
Yeah, so if you're at a store that where you're friends with everyone, it's fun. And fortunately for me, that my store was kind of like that. Like I actually like the boss, the store manager there, some of the associate, the senior game advisors and stuff. Like I actually had fun at the store. It was just when the district manager would come in, you were like, oh, this is not going to be a fun day. Because you always felt like they were trying to get you on something, just anything. They were just trying to like, it's almost like they were always looking to get you in trouble or get you fired for something. And I don't know if they were ever trying to set people up to get there, but they had that feeling when they walked in. So they'd come in with like mine was fun at my district manager. I still remember to this day, had the gold necklace, button down shirt, slick back hair, the 2-seater BMW that he'd drive in with.
All right. So you're your average Redditor. Okay.
Yeah, and he'd walk in, do the thing where he's got the hands on the hips and leaning back a little bit, looking around. It's just, that sign's a little crooked. It's like the one all the way up there that is like hanging from the ceiling. Yeah.
So just showing up and saying stupid shit just cause.
I mean, I've heard people like, they'd always share stories between. So one was like, oh, my district manager came in with a level and checked my sign. It's like, that never happened to me, but they do that thing where they walk in and there's something immediately wrong with the store when they're looking at it. Something has to be wrong. Something has to be off center, whatever. There's a problem. So they want to give you something to do as soon as they walk in the door. But it was like, you're walking on eggshells. Why the district manager's there? Otherwise, it was kind of just hanging out with their friends and stuff. And as long as everything was getting done and done well, great. And I'll admit, we came up with a lot of ways to get like numbers up for different things, pre-orders, subscriptions, and that kind of thing. So like promotions or trying to explain to the customer a bit more. Like if you're trading something in and then you get a used game with it, we did the math in our head and realized that the subscription card would cost you $1 and we'd sell it to you like that.
Jesus Christ.
Today it's $1 just for you though. Not for the person behind you, just for you. Hey, stop listening. This isn't for you. They're like, wait, that's $1? Yeah, it's $1.
For them.
We got so many Assassin's Creed. I remember this. The first Assassin's Creed on 360, we got so many pre-orders for it that Ubisoft sent everyone there a free copy in the store.
Wow.
Not Assassin's Creed 2, the first one. Very unfortunate.
Oh, okay.
The first one.
It's the first
Very
one.
unfortunate. Very unfortunate.
Here's the worst entry. Or not the lesser of the two, I should say.
I mean, basically the worst. I mean, people like the first one, but if you look around, it's like, come on, the second one was significantly better. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that just sort of validates the corporate side of it, and why. If anything, it's more fascinating that they took this long to do it. Not to say,
I don't know what that was about.
Not to say they should have shut them down sooner, but it's just, I don't know. I hate how they did that.
Just tell them be like, look, in a couple weeks we're shutting down. Okay, you might want to find a new job. It's like, what? Just do that. Don't be like, oh, the website's gone.
I mean, full stop. There's no good way to do it, I guess, but there's better ways to do it.
At least tell them. Be like, hey, you got a month. It's like, okay, thanks for telling me, rather than, oh, my key doesn't work in the door anymore.
It's like that. It seems like that happens every time.
It does. That's
Every
why I
time.
feel like this was like, this is some weird, I don't want to say panic move, but it just feels like last minute spur of the moment decision. Like, oh wait, nope, okay, go ahead and shut him down. It's like,
Yeah, like somebody checked the balance sheet and they're like, "Why are we still paying for this?" Makes a phone
yeah,
call.
basically,
Makes a phone call. It's the next day. It's over.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to some PlayStation production stuff because a number of things going on here this past week. Big one being a new teaser for The Last of Us HBO season 2 just dropped. Pretty cool. Very short teaser. Very short teaser, but saw Catherine O'Hara, Pedro Pascal, a very quick shot of Caitlin Dever as Abby, that opening sequence, and then also the Seraphites. Isaac was in there. He's playing the actor's playing the same actor from the game. And of course the iconic scene from Jackson. So we can see that the back view of Ellie in the dance, and just looked very good. I'm excited.
I want to see how the audience is going to react.
I'm sure we're all waiting with bated breath on that one.
I also want to know if they play around with the timeline even a little bit, because that does seem like it's going to alter the cast more than they might want to help sell the show.
I'm that's what I'm wondering, is if they will, because we know they're going to change some things and also include some things. So will there be significant changes to the timeline of how the game played out? Now, the thing is, I mean, we already know it's not going to be the full game. They're going to at least do 2, maybe 3 seasons. So what we saw was basically the Seattle portion of the game so far, I think. If I remember correctly, the Isaac stuff didn't show up till later. So if anything, that should confirm the timeline's already going to get moved around a little bit. But also, I've only gone through part 2 one time, so I'm just barely remembering certain aspects of elements that showed up.
Yeah, I feel like they're gonna move some. I think they'll move some stuff around, or just even take more time on certain parts to get it to that these 2 or 3 season mark for the second game. But I want to. I feel like maybe, you know what? Maybe that's how they close out this new season coming up. That's the cliffhanger closeout for everyone who's played. Obviously, you know what I've heard. Yes,
yeah, you would assume
5 iron. Yep, that's the way it goes.
Jesus Christ. The thing is, even if they do
pitching wedge.
If they do it very similar to the game, you're still going to get like a lot of that character because there's just flashbacks and stuff like that. So it's not like it's
maybe they do it like Yoda style. Like there's like a ghost. And they see them and they talk to them all the time.
Bold direction for season 2. Bold direction. All right, how about the Until Dawn movie? So we also learned that began shooting. Assad Kizilbash, SIE's head of production, head of product at PlayStation Studios, and also the head of PlayStation Productions. He put up a picture on Twitter just showing that, hey, we started filming. Just to run down that cast, there's Ella Rubin, Michael Cimino, Ji Young Woo, Odessa Ozion, Maya Mitchell, Belmont Kameli, and also Peter Stormare, who is reprising his role as Dr. Hill. No Hayden Panettiere and no Rami Malek, but that's the cast. Recognize any of those names, John? It's looking like a no.
I think it's so funny that Until Dawn is being turned into a movie.
Why
I feel like it's like I'm playing this visual novel, right? I feel like they were like, hey, the visual novel we're turning into a book. Like, okay. I mean, I think this is cool. I don't know.
I think this is a good movie. This is a good movie candidate.
Yeah. Okay. I mean,
it's a horror movie.
I kind of already view it as a movie. Like the game. I mean, it kind of is. If you look at it.
Oh shit, that's funny. Yeah, but like not everybody's. Yeah, well, I just think it's like a good candidate in that, like, it was like really popular like with streaming back in like 2014. That was still pretty early, and people watching Let's Plays on YouTube, and everybody like you watch the same game 18 goddamn times because you want to see your favorite channels like pick certain decisions. So I don't know. To me, it seems like a good idea, especially because like if it's bad, it's like it's still a horror movie. So like I know people like bad horror movies. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of the genres that can kind of get away with it, right? If it's bad, it's campy. It's considered campy.
So I don't know. I'm kind of into this idea. I want to see this one go through. So that's shooting. I assume that's going to finish and go out in 2025.
Hey, maybe it'll surprise me. There you go.
Yeah, maybe. Are you gonna go see it?
Probably not.
Probably not. Okay.
Hey, you know what? If it shows up on streaming randomly one night, tell you what, I'll check it out.
Okay, that's that low commitment. Like, if it's there, I'll do it kind of thing.
Hey, PlayStation has a little streaming service, but on PlayStation Plus, there you go.
Oh, the Sony Pictures Core application.
There it is.
Well, that's a possibility. The other one we have is Twisted Metal. Season 2 begins filming as well. I did not even watch season 1. I don't know if you did.
I didn't either. It was on Peacock, and there was this weird thing where they planned this out. I know they did, just to spite me, because they had Peacock, right? They were just giving Peacock away constantly. If you had Comcast, you had Peacock, and they took it away from me the week before Twisted Metal started. All of a sudden, Comcast can't help me with Peacock anymore. So there you go.
Well, yeah, okay, but the caveat is if you kept it, would you have watched it?
Yeah, probably.
Oh, really? Okay, so if you would have sat and gone through it. I've heard it's good. Which I mean, have you not heard that?
No, I think no, because I was thinking about signing back up for Peacock because I think they're gonna get like one. I thought they were part of the NFL thing where they're gonna try to get a game or something. They're trying to get something like that in the sports world. I was like, maybe that'll be enough commitment for me to do, or maybe I'll just sign up for a month and maybe I'll go watch Twisted Metal now. So
I've heard it's good. I mean, it's got lore and everything, so I guess they actually did do pretty well with that.
I have so many streaming services. My gosh, it's so many. It's like they got to put this one on there too.
Well,
I miss the days of cable. I miss the days of cable when they were jerks and sold us these massive
Don't even start, John.
Channels and premium channels and
packages. That's a pet peeve of mine. Go back to that doesn't make any sense. Still,
we do it to ourselves though. We're the salesmen now. We're the ones we hated. We've become the ones that we hate.
It's your fault if you sign up to all of them to where it comes out to the price of cable. I still think it's better because guess what? It's still what people wanted 20 years ago, which is I don't want to pay for everything. Let me pick and choose what I want. Now it's just more of a pain in the ass because you have to Google, how do I watch show X, Y, and Z? And then you have to, buy the service you want.
And then the service goes up to $25 a month just because.
Hey, Google makes it easy. If you type that in, like you type in a show name, it'll say available here, 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 here. You've seen that, right? Yes. Not too bad. All right, John. Let's move on to the show closer, best moment of the show. PSX, gonna give it to you, where we go over a cool, fun, interesting, maybe obscure moment in PlayStation history. I got a pretty interesting one for you, and very timely with Astrobots. I don't know if you remember this, John. I don't know if you remember this, but PlayStation 4, right? 2013 comes out, big deal, new generation. It has the Playroom pre-installed on the console, which is the first time we ever had Astrobot. Now, you needed the PS4 camera to really get mileage out of that thing, but it was this cool little, application where
PS4 camera.
No, of course you didn't.
I didn't have that.
I did because I'm a man of culture. So I was playing with Astrobots in 2013 like a true OG, and you could swipe the Astrobot. You could swipe bots out of the touchpad because that was new at the time too.
iToy.
Yeah, it was basically it's another iToy game or PlayStation i game. But the point is, this was really cool, right? So one thing that happened, I remember this very well, was that, a big part of PlayStation 4 was also that Sony baked in game recording features and streaming. So you could connect a Twitch or a Ustream account. So you could you could stream off your PlayStation 4. This is 2013. This is super early, by the way. So it's not nearly as big as it was nowadays. One guy used the Playroom to stream a talk show because it was very accessible, right? It was from the console. The camera's already, looking at you because you're always in shot, right? So he would stream the Playroom, but he turned it into a talk show. So he would have his Twitch account. And, with the Playroom, there's always a big robot circling around you. And it's playing this sort of groovy, elevator type music. And normally you could start swiping the Astrobots out, but he just wouldn't do that. and he would just like use it to stream himself and do a talk show, and it actually went kind of viral. Like he got
why aren't we doing this podcast like
that? Good point. Maybe we should do an Astrobot episode from the Playroom. So it's funny. I remember the show name that the guy had. It was called The Spartan Show. I think Kotaku did an article on it. And I remember it so well because it was like, they got like thousands of views or thousands of like concurrent viewers on Twitch. And then they would get to a point where they had like they would like make a desk and they put up like a number and people could call in. And so they were taking calls on the Playroom in 2013 on PlayStation 4.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have a PS4 camera now, obviously, because it came with the PSVR headset.
Yeah. I'm trying to find the article for it to send it over.
I should have the camera. We can do the talk show.
We probably should. A few places reported on it back then. I can't find it now.
That should be our Q&A episode. We should do an episode Q&A in the Playroom and then just have people like put like questions stuff in the chat.
Yeah. Oh, wait, this one says Twitch couples strip show could mean bad news for PlayStation 4.
Well,
a week after the console's launch, some PlayStation 4 users appear to be using Playroom, an augmented reality game taking place in one's living room, to broadcast ridiculous live shows involving nudity, firearms, and God knows what else. Yeah, I mean, other people are doing it too. So
the Wild West over there on the PlayStation 4.
It really was. Oh yeah, so they're included on here. Broadcasting something called the Spartan Show, which became a call-in talk show that attracted the attention of Shuhei Yoshida. Excuse me, Jesus Christ. Which became a call-in show that attracted the attention of Shuhei Yoshida, the president of studios for Sony Computer Entertainment, and Adam Boyes, the chief of publisher relations. Blah blah blah. There's NeoGAF stuff on here.
They called in.
You know what? I don't remember. I think they did.
That's actually that's pretty funny.
I should have maybe looked into it more before bringing it up, but it's like a very obscure memory I remember in 2013 because it's like, it was very accessible for like a console to offer streaming on Twitch. Right. And so people would just use the camera and they made it a talk show in 2013 and it like did go viral. Like I remember that dude would have like thousands of concurrent viewers, but the thing is it was still in the Playroom, right? So like the in-game music was always there. It was it was like always this elevator music and it is AR. So there's always this robot that is like following you around and shit. And sometimes, you do the goofy thing where if you touch it, you can like bat it away or something. And so it was just like always there in view, sort of like disrupting the talk show at the same time. It was a very goofy moment.
I feel like with StreamYard, I think you can point it at a capture card. I bet you we could have our PlayStation 4s on. We could have the camera and then we could be in Playroom and I could put them both in StreamYard here.
Well, how would that we'd have to both be using the Playroom, right? Or do you want to have one console? That'd be tough to do. That's
right.
Yeah. Because then we'd
use it and set it up and stuff and then run the video feed through our camera selection here on StreamYard and then just use our regular mics.
We'd have to look into how we could make that work. It was a very weird thing though at the time. I remember it very well.
That's clever. I'll give that's a clever idea.
Yeah. It was like a week after PS4 came out and people were like, "Oh, you can live stream on this. Oh, wait a minute, this camera points right at me." Oh.
Yeah, you have that like immediate released hype for the system like that. Yeah, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
All lines
up. For a very short time, there was a Twitch meta that involved PlayStation 4.
Should still be one. You can do it, Ryan.
Set it up. PlayStation 5.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any AR games that would allow that to happen though. That would facilitate that kind of interaction.
Wow. That's an interesting time. Different time.
It's very, very different
streaming.
Time.
Wow. No.
That's all I've got for you.
All right. Well, that's good. Good episode, Ryan. Good episode.
Yeah, I think that was pretty decent.
A lot of points there. Good 2 hours or so. Good stuff. When's next time our podcast is Concord will be out.
Yeah, we'll be seeing these folks on the around the 26th, 27th when the show.
Yeah, so we'll have Concord have come out, Black Myth Wukong will have come out.
Yeah.
I am picking that one up. I'm gonna grab that.
Okay, very, very good.
Okay. Okay. So you'll take care of Concord then.
I will be playing a lot of probably PlayStation 3 stuff during that time.
No Concord. Wow. Okay. Got it.
I don't even play the beta, so what does that tell you?
Yeah. I'll be picking up Black Myth Wukong though. We actually have reviews. It'll be going live this week at the end of this week.
Okay,
So.
I'd be curious to hear what you think of that.
Yep. So I will pick that one up. Star Wars Outlaws will be outside of that episode. Yeah, because that's out that week actually. That will be released the next episode. So, but the next one will be Astrobot, I believe.
The one after that,
exciting.
You mean?
Yeah, one after that. Yep. That's exciting. That's exciting. So things are starting to get moving here. Exciting stuff coming up, moving into the holiday season, that kind of that Q4 where a bunch of releases start hitting. So I think it's gonna be a lot of fun here soon. And then that PS5 Pro, of course, just out there somewhere. So
yep.
Exciting stuff. All right. Good stuff. That's gonna do it here for episode 5 of Click R3. Myself and Ryan. We will see you guys in a couple of weeks to talk about Ryan's thoughts on Concord. We'll see you then.